Good afternoon, colleagues. Could I ask you to be upstanding? We will have the prayers before the formal start of the meeting. My chaplain is unavailable today, so I will read the prayer that he's presented me with. Go before us, O Lord, with the blessings of your goodness, and guide all those of us you have called to positions of leadership and authority in this county, in the ways of justice and peace, the knowledge of your liberty, and the wisdom of your gentleness, to the honour and glory of your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Our Lord, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Chairman of Monmouthshire County Council.
Good afternoon, everybody in the chamber and those outside looking in. Just to remind you, councillors, that we are live streaming today, and please remember to turn your microphones off when you finish speaking, and if you could speak through the chair at all times, I'd appreciate it. And normal rules of debate will follow. So we will open the meeting with item number 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Do I have apologies for absence? Councillor Taylor?
Councillor Marshall.
Councillor Howarth?
Councillor Wintle, Councillor Smith, Councillor Haywood and Councillor Chapman.
Any other? Councillor Hackett-Payne? Thank you. Is that it on apologies for absence? Okay, so we now move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is Chairman's report and receipt of petitions. My report is as presented. There's one error in there. It's listed that I lunched with the Lord Lieutenant. Unfortunately, he was taken ill the previous day, so that didn't happen, just for the record. I'm glad to report he's made a speedy recovery. Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Thank you very much, Chairman. May I ask you a question on your itinerary here? I noticed that there are a lot of functions to do with being the champion for the armed forces. Would it be possible to ask a question?
Yes, please do.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like to ask if you could furnish us with some information concerning the Afghan interpreters. A little while ago in the council chamber, we made provision so that if the interpreters came back to this country, we would most certainly welcome them in our county, and I think there was some provision there for housing. I noticed yesterday in a couple of the newspapers about Afghan interpreters being left in Afghanistan, and I just wondered if you could find out if, in effect, our county had taken on board that and had welcomed them here.
Certainly, Councillor. I'll take that forward and find out how Monmouthshire is affected and whether or not we've received any Afghan interpreters. Yes, certainly will. Now, I do believe there was a petition to be presented today. Is that correct?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, I've been asked to present this petition to the Council so that it can be formally acknowledged and recognised. This petition is part of a Make Trellick Safe campaign, and it's just shy of 200 signatures, which clearly demonstrates the strength of feeling amongst local residents and parents for the need to address safety issues along the B4293 road through Trellick. Now, for those who aren't aware of Trellick in that road, it's a narrow, bendy road that winds its way through the village, and it passes primary school, a doctor's surgery, a playgroup, a village hall, a church and a pub, and there are no footpaths. So you are literally taking your life in your own hands when you're trying to walk around the village, particularly now when volume and speed of traffic has increased over the years. Vicky, what it's resulted in is that parents are now having to bundle their children into their car and literally drive 400, sometimes only 200 metres. I think it's just they want me to make it very clear as to what the petition's about, and I'm nearly finished because I know you were just that they're having to get the kids in the car and drive them 400, sometimes 200 metres to the school to drop the kids off safely. And Vicky Evans, who is a parent, a resident and a driver of this campaign, highlighted the irony of this situation because it's encouraging behaviour that flies in the face of the environmental, the health and well-being policies that are encouraged by Monmouthshire County Council and the Welsh Government. So it's through this petition and campaign that residents and parents want to work with Monmouthshire County Council and the police to develop an action plan to make Trellick safe. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Could you present the petition to the front here, and I will make sure it goes to the appropriate officers for their attention. Thank you for that. One last thing on the Chairman's report, really. It's just to let you know that it's not a report as such, but next Monday morning there is a seminar in this chamber for adult safeguarding, and it's going to be led by Dr. Angie Ash, who is an independent adult safeguard specialist of national standing. So I thought I'd advise you that that is taking place on Monday in this chamber. So thank you for that. And we now go on to item 3 on the agenda, which is to receive declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? As and when then? Okay, thank you. We now go on to item 4 on the agenda, which is to confirm and sign the minutes of the following meeting. 4A, Council meeting 25th of September 2014. Move. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Webb. Are you all in favour of accepting, or are there any points to raise? Anyone got a point to raise? Councillor George.
Just a minute to be reflected for my attendance, please. I was here.
Certainly, I'm sure the officers will make do record of that. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. The same applies to me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. Page 19, the question I put to Councillor Hobson, it refers that it would be deferred to a future meeting. I've had an answer to that question. I had to leave before that was stated, but I've had an answer to the question now, so it won't be valid today.
Thank you, Councillor. Are we all willing to accept, all those in favour accepting the minutes as amended? Thank you. Item 4B, extraordinary council meeting on the 22nd of October.
Move.
A move again, seconder for that. Councillor Greenland. Any items to raise? Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Only for information, as you see, the final recommendation of the day was to that I would, as leader, report back to this council on the results of any discussions at my earliest opportunity. I thought somebody may ask me today, but I preempted that. I am having conversations with other leaders, but at this point, obviously, they're at that stage where I wouldn't want to or couldn't really announce anything in this chamber. But just to reassure members that that there are conversations going on across South East Wales in regard to the item.
Thank you, Councillor. In that case, are we all agreed to the minutes? All those show in favour? So, sorry, I've got somebody wants to highlight an error. Councillor Edwards.
It's got Mrs. Kerry Robson as Head of Legal Services. That's on the minutes.
Thank you for spotting that, Councillor Edwards. That will be corrected accordingly. Councillor Haworth.
Chairman, I just want to take up on the comments made by the Leader of the Council. The Chief Executive also was representing this Council in putting our case forward on direction. Has anything the Chief Executive would like to say on that? And I'm really astounded now that the Leader of the Council, who's representing us in discussions with other leaders, won't comment as reference to things he has which he doesn't want to comment on. He was governed by this council with the Chief Executive to represent us. Could you please just give us an update, somebody, because we did need to respond, and I'm led to believe it was an urgent matter in the last meeting we had. Thank you.
Allow the leader to come back on that.
Just, I'll read the recommendation as recorded by the council minutes, as put in here, that if council determines to explore the merger, or if council is compelled by Wales Government at a future date to merge, that delegated authority is given to the leader of the council and chief executive to engage with counterparts in initial discussions about merger, and then report back to council with result reports on discussions at the earliest opportunity. At this point, what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, whilst there are discussions, they are not developed enough to report back formally to this council.
Thank you, Councillor. So,
Chair, can I ask a question about that? Can I ask who the discussions have been with precisely? Is that an appropriate question?
well I said
why? I just really want to know why there's almost like a shroud of secrecy over this. I mean, there's been information. We haven't. No, it's not a conspiracy. You said conspiracy. I've simply asked a question, which is, clearly the Leader of the Council has had meetings. I'd like to know, as an elected member, who he's had meetings with. That's it.
I'll leave you come in, Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I've talked to all leaders in Wales about this situation as it's raised at a coordinating board, which is 22 council leaders. I've spoken to individual leaders, and there are only 22 in Wales. I've spoken to several of those informally around the subject and shared the recommendations of this council.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just that it does say, and I did specifically ask the Chief Executive to give us an update on the specifically what feedback we'd given to Welsh Government about our position, and that's not quite, it's reflected sort of, but not verbatim in the minutes. But we had made a decision which wasn't concurrent with the guidelines from Welsh Government, and we specifically asked that the Chief Executive hold or advise Welsh Government of our position and that we get some feedback. I don't know if that's possible, Chair.
Right, I've got Councillor Petruni, Councillor Eason, and then I'll let the Chief Executive make a comment on this.
Thank you, Chairman. The independents are a disadvantage, Chairman, because I am aware of what discussions Councillor Fox has had, because there are other Labour leaders he's having them with. And I kind of broadly know the topics of conversation. So I feel sympathy with independents here, Chair, because they have, even though they're elected members, have no access to that kind of knowledge. And I just want to be clear on how does Councillor Fox define an informal and a formal meeting?
Right, I'll go to Councillor Easton next, and then we'll go to the Chief Executive.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I find that Councillor Fox's answer is inadequate for this council. We've got 15 days on a deadline to decide whether we want a voluntary merger or sit back and do nothing. It would seem to me that on the basis of where we are at the moment, we will be in a forced merger situation after the 28th of November, unless Councillor Fox could elucidate a bit further as to the drive and direction that some of his discussion had, whether it be informal or formal, because I am aware that Bridgend are talking to Mid Glamorgan, that Torfaen are talking to Blaenau Gwent. We are not talking to Newport, Newport's not talking to us. So I feel it's important that the Councillor Fox is a bit more open about his discussions, because we're all entitled to know, and I think that this is important.
Could I invite the Chief Executive if he has any comment on the status of that?
Yeah, the comment's not going to be particularly inspiring for you. To be very clear, in terms of the use of the word formal and informal, I haven't been part of any formal or informal discussions with any of my peers since the last council meeting looking to advance a model above and beyond those suggestions, recommendations set out by Wales Government. In terms of Councillor Taylor's question, I have furnished Wales Government with the conclusions that this council reached at its last meeting, and that's it really. I'm not expecting any particular correspondence from Wales Government imminently, and if I may expand into Councillor Eason's point, I left the last council meeting with a very clear view that this council wouldn't be putting in a proposal for early adoption of a merger request, so any deadlines in November are to a degree artificial to this council, I would suggest.
Okay, councillors, I think the message has been received that we need constant updates as council meetings progress. I think it's quite obvious that there's nothing to report of substance. So I'd like to move to the minutes. Would you accept the minutes as read as accurate, which is what we're on? All those in favour of the accuracy of the minutes?
Point of order, Chair. Are we not entitled to answers to our questions?
But if the leader is willing to answer that question, I'll give way to you to do that.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm struggling to understand what the concern is here. The whole of the WLJ are debating the whole of reorganisation, clearly in line with the decisions of this council. I have been talking to leaders. It would be wrong for me to share those leaders of other authorities who may want to discuss things with their own members to divulge any of the nature of the conversation that we've had, albeit that I am sharing with you that I've shared Monmouthshire's position and will to look at other alternatives which would be, we believe, as this council agreed, in the interest of Monmouthshire more so than a merger. I totally uphold what the Chief Executive just said. This council made agreement last time it met on this subject that it did not want to pursue a voluntary merger with any of our immediate neighbours.
Right, I've got two more councillors. I don't want to open a debate on this council. It's not an agenda item because the leader was offering the situation as he saw it, I think. So I've got Councillor Down and Councillor Harris, and then we'll call it.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate this isn't an agenda item. However, it is obviously crucially important to the future of our county. I have, I think, some sympathy for Councillor Fox in his position. And to that extent, I can understand why a public statement may not be appropriate. However, I think it is important that, at least at senior member level within the authority, there is a clear exchange and people all have the same knowledge. And I should be grateful, therefore, if the leader would agree to regularly, and I mean regularly, update the political leadership group on developments.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask the leader if he's divulged any of the information he has to members of his group and or the Lib Dem group.
Could I invite you to answer those last two questions, Leader, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It had been in my intention to brief political leaders group. Obviously, it's going to be an item where I'll give whatever information I can. I have to act in the best interest of this council, and I thank Councillor Down for recognising that it's very difficult to give public statements on things which are so sensitive as this, and it is very sensitive. I have. Regarding briefing other members, members of my group know that I have spoken to leaders in the same way as I've just appraised the rest of you here, and that's the depth of the conversation to date.
Thank you, Leader. Right, could I ask you now then to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of that meeting, please? All those in favour? That's clearly carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 5, public forum items, and there are none today, so we move on to item 6, which is to receive the minutes of the following meeting. The Internal Monitoring Board, 20th of October 2014. I invite the Leader to present.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I present to you the minutes today of the Internal Monitoring Board held on Monday the 20th. For information, as usual, obviously I wasn't actually there, but I'm still presenting these as chair, formal chair of the committee. But I'm sure if there's any questions on the bulk of the report, that our Chief Officer would be able to help us out. And I'll move those minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have a seconder for that move? Councillor Greenland. Any councillors wish to make a comment? Councillor Breakbrown.
Thanks, Chair. Just going to page 30, I've just got a list here. Schools will be, under the additional learning needs, schools will be responsible to know the needs of its pupils. Resources have now been devolved to schools with an added level of accountability. Funding for additional learning needs will rest with schools' budgets. As I was reading through that, it was just, if the local authority is transferring the workload and responsibility of additional learning needs support to the schools, I'm just keen to highlight the need for the additional learning need budget to also be devolved to the schools, because I am mindful of proposed cuts to the additional learning needs budgets in the next year.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Taylor?
Just a quick point. Obviously, we note that the additional learning needs strategy is now prepared, and I think members may recall that, I think it might have been in June, we did ask that once that was completed, that ought to come to full council so that all councillors could understand the implications for the strategy as we move to the future. So I wonder if I could once again remind the planners of the agenda that would be very welcome to come to council as appropriate, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure the Chief Executive is here and will consider that accordingly. Councillor Watts?
Yeah, on page 31, it says child poverty. In response to the question raised regarding child poverty in Monmouthshire, the Chief Officer for Children and Young People stated that the authority was aware of this issue and was getting better at identifying the progress being made. Can we expand on that? How I struggle to see this, certainly on a week-to-week basis, how the authority is getting a grip of this issue, which is sadly ever growing and becoming ever more depressing, really. How is the authority getting better at identifying child poverty in Monmouthshire?
Could you take that question, Sarah?
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Watts. A really important question. We are improving continuously at tracking our children. This is what this is in reference to, knowing very clearly our groups of children and knowing our children individually. So the reference in these minutes is to exactly that. We're working also with the EAS to develop much better tracking systems so that individual pupil progress can be demonstrated.
Thank you. Any other councillors want to raise any points? Councillor Greenland? A bit enthusiastic in suggesting that I second these. I actually read through them in detail at the weekend, so much so that I clearly thought I was at the meeting. But I wasn't at the meeting, and it's therefore not appropriate that I second them. No, I think you're proposing that we receive them, Councillor, not
Well,
accept in the
I'm
minutes.
suggesting that somebody else might wish to second them.
Councillor Jones? Yes, okay, you can second if he's not safe about that. Okay, any other questions on it? If not, could I ask you all to vote that you receive these as instructed? Yeah? Clearly carried. Thank you, councillors. We now go on to notices of motion, item 7 on the agenda. And this is a motion by Councillor Batruni. So, Councillor Batruni, if you'd like to present, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Before we start this debate, the group would like to acknowledge the fact that we are in the centenary of the start of the First World War, and the fact that we can have these debates and argue and have heated arguments even is the fact of sacrifices by so many people, and we just should acknowledge that publicly, Chair. The Labour Group's put many motions forward to Council, standing up for residents, Monmouthshire residents, wherever we can. But I feel, I know this group feels, it's one of the most important motions we put forward to Council. The motion relates to post-16 SEN transport. I and several other Council colleagues, including Councillor Blakeborough, Councillor A. Watts, Councillor Eason, have met families, met the children, discussed the issues and problems they have faced with the process. I think we've met 4 or 5 times now. And it was very much about listening to what they experienced and them telling us what needs to change in the policy. So they have guided these amendments on this. And so we regard them as reasonable amendments, Chair, and I'll just go through them because it's amendments to the original policy as was sent to me by an officer. The inclusion of A, the authority will define disability as written in the Equalities Act, basically that acknowledges that mental disability is on par with a physical disability. This relates to some parents being told, Chair, that a mental disability was defined as not is not a medical need, and that's what parents were told directly, and I was told actually as well. And so we felt it was really incredibly important that we explicitly put that in the motion, explicitly put that in the policy. So when children are assessed or young people are assessed for this support, whether they can have support or not, Chair, that their mental disability is taken fully into consideration, because the parents have told us that they have been told that's not the case. They don't see it as a medical need, and we profoundly disagree with that, Chair. Another amendment was the authority would communicate the decision to parents. I won't read out the whole thing, but basically this relates to parents. Some parents were told sometimes days before the term was about to start for their child that they would not be receiving transport. We don't think this is an appropriate way to handle such matters, Chairman. That's poorly timed, and we believe there's another reasonable amendment in our mind, Chairman, that parents should be informed as quickly as practically possible and well before term starts. So the parents can appeal the decision, or have enough time to appeal the decision, so the child can access education without have the ability to appeal the decision, and so they can access it, the appeal panel without the child education being affected. And also, Chairman, that parents are fully communicated in terms of why they were successful, because some parents were told they were successful in the past, Chairman, and then the year on they're told they're not successful, and the reason was that the only reason why they got transport in the first place was because some other child had been given transport and that their child was just put on that bus. But this was never communicated to parents, and so it was a shock to them that suddenly their child was not on the bus, because they always thought they had been eligible in the past. So this is not communicating effective information to parents, so they know the reasons why they've been successful, whether it's because of a medical need or just because another child has received the transport in that year and their child's just on that bus. So we feel this should be done in a timely manner. We think that's a reasonable amendment, Chairman. And the other one relates to the bottom amendment, relates to basically if the council believes a post-16 young person should go on public transport rather than getting support necessarily, that there's been like independent reviews. There's an independent review into whether this is suitable and what arrangements have been put into place. So we can empower actually young people with mental disabilities to catch public transport, because we do in the end want them to be able to engage in normal day-to-day activity and to be confident to do so. But just to tell them to do so just because they've turned 16 or for any other reason is not appropriate. So the appropriate arrangement should be put in place and reviewed to see whether they can attain that level of independence, Chairman. I just may roll down on those amendments. So after meeting with parents, after hearing their stories, after other councils have met parents, we feel these are reasonable amendments. The parents are realistic, the families themselves are realistic. They know not every child will be accepted, will be, should be accepted even. They're realistic, but they should be treated fairly and they should be communicated with effectively, telling them appropriate bits of information and in a timely manner. That simply hasn't been the case so far. That's not me saying that, that's the parents saying that. So as one family told me, how could anyone reject these proposals? Anyone who rejects them doesn't have a heart, and I totally agree with that, and the Labour group totally agrees with that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I've now got Councillor Hackett-Payne. Oh, I need a seconder, sorry, I need a seconder first. Councillor Farley is seconder. Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I most certainly support this motion, and in effect, when you look at it, I'm just switching between the pages. The majority of it is policy already. Little 1, little 2, little 3, little 4, little 5 is already existing policy. Capital A in there states the Equality Act. That is law. We have to abide by that already. If Councillor Petruni feels that this isn't happening, there are processes to address that. But I agree with all of that. The other two at the end, again, I agree with both of those, and I will come back to that in a minute. I think one of the most wonderful aspects of being involved with education in Monmouthshire is the all-inclusive approach to children and young people. Our schools have the ability to teach almost any child in our schools because of that ethos. And our new schools and refurbished schools also are an environment to nurture and help children achieve whatever their ability. The last thing we ever want to do is to label children, put labels on them and put them into boxes. And that's why I think the term additional learning needs is excellent, because it doesn't do that. It doesn't stop. We all have to have support at some time. What we need to do, I think, is take it even further than is stated in this motion. I would like actually, where it is stated in 6 about the 7 days, in effect letting parents know in 7 days, I most certainly do agree with that, but I would like to actually, when we review additional learning needs, actually look at being able to bring this in line with mainstream students' application for transport, which is, the date is the 30th of June. So if all applications for transport, whether they be SEN, whether they be mainstream, were all with the authority at the 30th of June, and some of those may be provisional, some of them may have a couple of options there, but if they were there with the authority at the 30th, this would give plenty of time for any panel to meet, the parents to have enough time to be able to make choices, and they would know what those choices were. So in effect, I wholeheartedly support this. I don't know, we're doing it already, in effect. It's law, some of it. And I would actually take it further in the ALN review. I think the assessments are, in effect, when the children are educated within our schools up to the age of post-16, it is relatively simple. After that, it is never a simple case because the children and young people are going to different establishments. They're not staying within our own environment, within our own schools. So they can be different colleges, they can be in different counties, they can be in different parts of the country. And each of those have different criteria. In effect, Coleg Gwent should be paying for transport to Coleg Gwent. We need to be able to work with these colleges to ensure that happens. Quite often it doesn't, and our council ends up picking up the whole bill. So we need to look at this a little bit further. But I think post-16 is never quite as simple as our school side of things. But I wholeheartedly support this.
So just to clarify, Councillor, you're not actually making an amendment, you're saying you agree with the proposal and you give an advance notice that you will include those other things in the review in June. Okay, thank you. So any other councillors? Councillor Watts.
Yes, Chair. It's interesting now that all these weeks on, we find ourselves in this room having a debate about a policy that we're told is already in place, that we're already doing it. In fact, we're not already doing it. When it comes to the Equalities Act, we certainly haven't applied any of that to a policy that is 2 years old, which was just implemented this year. I mean, what I witnessed was that children basically were completely disregarded by this authority. They were given, as Dimitri says, a week's notice. Some of those children haven't had an appropriate education for over 6 weeks. And as he rightly says, they're informed days before, after already being told in some cases that they had transport laid on. I mean, imagine this for a second, if you're a single parent and you're having to obviously make then emergency arrangements for that child. It's impossible. I've been on this authority now for many years and I've seen many, many things happen, but frankly, I have never, ever seen anything so collectively as appalling as this, where we've completely walked away from those children, some of the most vulnerable children in our community. We write letters to them telling them that, bearing in mind some of those children have specific special needs and having a learning age of a 5-year-old, that they have to get on a service bus. I mean, it's shambolic. I'm quite angry about it, and I'm angry for those parents, and I'm angry for my community, because this authority can be better, has been better, and is being, well, frankly, is in quite a mess. So we really need to get our act together here today. I appreciate what Liz is saying, but frankly, she should have picked this up the day that she knew about it. Thank you.
Any other councillors? Any other councillors? Councillor Blakeborough? Councillor Howard?
Thanks. Yes, I've been involved with the negotiations with others, with parents. And I have to say, I do think there has been some progress, basically because parents have raised the issue. And because of that, there has been some progress and changes have taken place. And actually, I'm sitting here quite happy that we are actually all agreeing on this. And we have, I do believe, for whatever reason, the parents have been listened to, and people are wanting to take it further. And it's good to hear that Councillor Payne is agreeing to this and also wanting to take that further. And I would be suggesting that possibly having a steering group, cross-directorate steering group, along with some parents being invited to look at the additional learning needs post-16, transport and education policies together, because they are intertwined, and I think some of these issues have been caused through the transitional period from secondary to further education. And I think some of the parents I've spoken to, and I think some members would like to be part of that, to absolutely get it right, and not to separate the two directorates but to bring them together, so we've got a more robust policy for the future.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the Cabinet members' comments that there's going to be a review of additional learning needs and transport, and certainly welcome that. I would suggest perhaps to the Labour leader that if he does really care about this, then we should be addressing the policy as a whole. It's dated, I think it's about 5 years old. And really, it's an ideal opportunity for a scrutiny view or for a seminar, task and finish, and a great opportunity then to look at good and bad practice elsewhere. And I happen to notice, despite what Councillor Watts said about public transport, that I was reading through Cardiff's SCN policy and reference to pupils with additional learning needs, where they're actually trained over a period to to have the confidence to use public transport. So there might be opportunities where it's an appropriate thing to do. So yes, whilst I agree with the motion, Mr. Chairman, I do think we should be filling our roles better if we seek to judge the whole policy for whether it meets the needs of users. And as Councillor Blaker has said, that's decent background information, officer input, member input, and not just a cherry-picked sample that the Labour leader has chosen for political purpose.
Councillor Francis Taylor.
Can I point to personal explanation? The parents approached me.
Sorry, Chair. On a point of personal explanation, I appreciate that Councillor Bertuni's presentation today in the explanation of the motion is as he has stated it, but of course what we've read in the paper is rather different, and it takes a very political angle, and I'd rather object to that.
Okay, councillors, can you please attend to the motion that's in front of us? That's what we're debating.
As a point of order, really, we wouldn't be here today had it not been for Dimitri coming and putting this forward.
Councillor, if you are raising a point of order, what part of the articles are being broken at the moment, please? Right, thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Francis Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure that all the families that have been engaged in this process would welcome the motion that's been put forward today, and I certainly support it. But one of the things that I've specifically asked for is that we review what happened in this process over the past few months, because it is important that we learn from it. My understanding is there were a number of issues. There were administrative issues, there were issues of directorates not communicating effectively together. And whilst we are hopefully reassured that that is now rectified, I still believe that it's important that we take a look back before we can take a look forward. So I would like to propose that, indeed, I did propose to Hugh in the Transport Department that we would do that we would whoever we is, would sit around and have a look at what went wrong and how we can ensure that as we move into a new policy, that does not reoccur, because it is very well to plan our new policy, but we must make sure that simple things that such as administrative errors, which can cause such a lot of pain, do not occur again, and we must understand the reasons why they occurred. I would also like to say that once officers began working together to rectify the situation that many families found themselves in, I do think that officers really did try and respond very quickly, but it was very clear that despite some assurances that processes were in place, that it has taken some time for that to happen. And it's important that it's brought to light and it doesn't occur again. And I would probably guess, and this is one of my concerns, that I've dealt with families in my own ward, but there are very possibly families that haven't known to contact their local councillor or haven't been back in touch with the authority and could possibly be still in a situation where there might be a place for them, but they are not currently aware of that, and that is a concern, because we may well have families who are in a disadvantaged position not able to access the service that they could. But again, I would commend the officers that have worked quite hard and very quickly to turn the situation around when it was brought to their attention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Relevant officers are here today, and I'm sure they're listening to those issues. Councillor Easton, please.
Thank you once again, Chair. We've got a motion before us today which there's consensus across the table, across the floor. There are words in this motion which there's consensus across the floor, but equally the words of this policy need to be put in the proper context. It needs to be updated so that it reflects what this motion says. So I don't see that the authority will be looking to put dots and A's in there. Also, corporate directors, which are now chief officers. There's also the date of 30th of June mentioned. Now, all these discussions across the table today on a consensus need to be put into a policy which has got to be rewritten to suit what this council today is has a consensus view on. And I would suggest that Councillor Hackett-Payne, as the Cabinet member, takes this on board to reword this policy after we agree the consensus we got on the matter of fact of the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor, can I clarify that? Are you proposing an amendment, or are you just making information aware to the officers for future to be reconsidered?
I'm concerned that we're going to vote on this as a motion, agree this is the motion, but the words in it don't really reflect what the policy needs to say.
So are you proposing an amendment or not, Councillor?
No, not really. I'm asking for seeking a way forward to get this policy written in a proper manner based on the consensus we got today.
Can I assure you, Councillor, that there will be minutes of this debate today, and that it will be in the minutes next time round, and I'm sure the relevant officers here are taking all that into account. So thank you for that, and I now have Councillor Crook.
I just wanted to pick up on a comment that Liz made a second ago. You were sort of trying to defend the position that we've, yourself has found yourself in. You said, I don't know about it, and to me that's just no kind of defence at all. You're the expert, you're the cabinet member for this. You need to know about it. These are people's lives. You need to know about it. We all need to know about it, and we need to be doing something about it. That's no line of defence for me, and I want to make sure that in the future you do know about these things, and we are doing something about these things.
Councillor Haworth.
Thank you, Chairman, and wholeheartedly the Independents do support this motion. We'd be looking for an extra provision put in there, probably number 7, on the direction of Councillor Blakeburn and Councillor Taylor's comments. As a parent with 2 young sons in education post 16, I do find it very, very difficult with transport with them. I can't imagine how difficult it's going to be with special education needs children in transport. And Dimitri, you're quite right, asking them parents to put their children on a service bus from, let's say, Caldicott Chepstow down to Cross Keys. I know how difficult it is to get one son from Cross Keys back to Abergavenny area, and he isn't SEN. So I sympathise with parents. I'd just like to know then, it says college course in full-time and follows on immediately from school attendance. Let me tell you now, councillors, that if you've got sons or daughters in education post 16, their courses are like a little roller coaster. They do not know some weeks when their school lessons are. It does alternate round each term. And what we need to be looking at here is making sure that they are catered for. So an example is, if a child gets there for 9 o'clock, he may have to leave there at 2 o'clock because his school day's finished. How the heck does he get home? And if he's got special needs, does he stand at the bus stop? Who's with him? There's lots of things we need to be thinking about here. So what I would recommend is that we put a proviso in there as a number 7, that we have a cross-party working group just going through the policies, what we have in place, and having a think, have we got this right? Because, Tony, you're quite right. If we agree this today, the cabinet member has clearly said that policies in place for number 1, policy in place for number 2. Let's revisit them with a cross-party working group, and let's get it right for the next term time. If I can have a second for that, please, I'd like to propose that, if you're happy with that, Dimitri, to put that on the end there, that we set something up. Thank you.
Right, that's a proposed amendment, which is adding, in this context, I think I can just about allow something to be added rather than, it's not an amendment, but I think it's appropriate to the debate. So do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Down, right. So now we debate the amendment. Councillor Payne, Harkin Payne.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to point out there is already a transport education advisory group set up. It was originally set up to look at post-16 transport, and in effect we didn't touch the ALN budget last year, and that is already existing. So I think that vehicle is already there, and I would suggest that has already been set up. And I think it may be worth perhaps, it's very difficult sometimes. I only realised yesterday what was actually involved in an assessment, and I'm not going to read out all the bits and pieces here, but this is an independent assessment that takes place on every child for transport if they have additional learning needs. It looks at their mobility and their physical function, their intellectual and sensory function, their communication, behavioural and interactions. It then looks at any hazards that could be identified on the bus. That's then scored. Then there's an assessment of the risks of getting from wherever they live to the college. There's the likelihood and severity of harm. There's another risk rating. Then there's the child's requirements, the vehicle requirements, the escort requirements. The escort requirements continued, the parents' requirements, and then there's another risk assessment. And I feel that at the moment probably that is in place, but I think it would be worthwhile with the advisory group looking at these points so that members perhaps could have a better understanding. And like I say, the assessments that do take place are quite comprehensive. It's not just a case of sort of putting a child on a bus stop. It wouldn't be that. It has to be assessed and a risk assessment done from that. And that is reassessed as well every September.
Right, councillors, we are debating the amendment which is adding an item as V11, which is as the councillor suggested. So I've now got Councillor Watts and then Councillor Taylor.
Okay, Councillor Hackey-Payne has brought up an interesting issue because really one of the key problems with this was the confusion over that specific form. All of the parents that I spoke to seem to have an issue with it. In fact, the authority and the officers have acknowledged that the complication and the slight ambiguity of some of the questions has led to, in part, to some of this mess. To the point where my understanding of it was that one of the senior officers in transport was trying to engage with a local group or charity to basically rewrite that form. It isn't good enough, and I'm surprised Liz hasn't had that conversation because this has been highlighted for a number of weeks now. So I'm surprised that she wants to defend this form. I'm kind of, if you like, I'm sympathetic to what this amendment, in as much as that I do think it's important that we get this right. It's important that we, the devil's always in the detail, and frankly, in this case, if we just leave it to the authorities, somehow they work it out themselves. Well, in case it didn't happen, and I think it does need some further scrutiny and some further involvement from people who understand this. What I don't want it to be is just a kind of prolonged learning exercise for all the councillors to understand precisely what's happened here. I just think we need to move on as quickly as we can, get the policy in place and make sure it works, because we don't want to be here this time next year taking phone calls from parents who are just beside themselves trying to kind of work out what on earth has gone wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Francis Taylor, and we are on item 7, the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if I've been slightly misunderstood in what I was suggesting, but I do agree with Councillor Watts. One of the issues was that, it's pretty unclear to parents what they needed to do, what they didn't need to do, whether they needed to provide additional information, whether they didn't. Clearly, that needs to be reviewed. I would just welcome, I was suggesting a quick one-off meeting initially to say, this is what went wrong, this is what we need to do better. And then there is a cross-party group or an advisory group that can have a look at all the issues that have been identified, including those of what's wrong with the form, how we communicate with parents, some of which is picked up already in the amendment, but which needs considering. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to know, I don't know who's on the advisory group, and I saw quite a number of I didn't know about that. It's great that there is one, but perhaps if the, I don't know if the advisory group could perhaps do with some of that information too.
Councillor Graham Down.
Councillor Taylor's made my point.
Councillor Kevin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm astounded, really, that the Cabinet member responsible for this waited until yesterday to actually read up what the assessment was. To my mind, that's something that's key to this whole debate. We as a council have presided over a massive bodge up These parents are not making this up. They've had serious concerns for some time, and I think now is the time, like they say, we have to get it right, and whatever that takes, whether it comes through a transport group, whether it comes through a children and young people group, whatever, we need to get this right now and stop presiding next year over such a big cock-up as we did this year.
Councillor Debbie Blakeborough.
Yeah, just reiterating what people are saying, I guess just perhaps using the advisory group as a vehicle to set up a specific steering group. I don't want it to kind of get lost really in the mire. So it's a specific steering group, cross-directorate, so you've got social services, education and transport, and you have parents and cross-party, so we can all sit around the table and review those two policies that are interlinked, transport and education, and with a time limit, so that we work together and something positive comes out of this.
Right, councillors, I think we're all of a similar mind here today. We will go to a vote on the amendment. I will ask the councillor to read out his V11, Councillor Howarth, please, for the record.
That the council set up an advisory group with a time limit to look at the SEN policy on transport and education in conjunction with the other bodies within the council, i.e. social services, and members will be a part of that cross-party.
Okay, so that is the amendment. Councillor Harris, is it...
Sorry, Chair, slightly confused. There's a V11 here already.
It's an additional one. It's V111. Yes, the sort of councillor said V11 earlier, and I got off the track. So, councillors, I think we've had a good debate on that. I think we're all wanting to see success. So, the proposal is the motion as tabled, with the addition of the V1111 just read out by the councillor. So we're now going to the vote. So all those in favour of the amended motion? I think that's unanimous, councillors. I think there's a good debate, and we've fleshed out some ideas, and thank you, guys. Sorry, you had the right to reply, councillor. Right, so what we've done now is we've agreed the amended version. So now I can go to the Councillor Petroni to respond as the original proposer, and then we'll have a vote. Anything, Councillor?
I'm in shock, but great, fantastic. It's exactly the result we wanted, and I welcome the coalition. Pardon? Well, it's a Conservative Party.
Councillors, please address the issues. You must retain to the motions that we're talking about here. All right. So, well, we're not asking questions at the moment. So you can sum up as you said, as you feel fit, councillor. Have you finished or not? Okay. Well, just sum up, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed. Councillor Howard was annoyed with indignation of my hard-politicking statement to the press about this, and I was overzealous with my statement. I think I used the word harm. No Conservative Party would actively harm. What I meant to say was harm them educationally, because they weren't getting the access to the transport they needed. And I was driven by passion when I wrote that, because for me politics is all about passion, and this is exactly, well, Carl Fox sniggers. I don't find it funny matter personally. I've experienced with a disabled child, and I've worked in play schemes with an ADHD child, and coming from meeting those families were experienced, and Councillor Hacker-Payne sniggering as well. When you're coming from those families where their child can't get access to their school or college after what they were told by some of the officers, and their despair, given the troubles they have to face in normal everyday to-day life, I'm really pleased they've come to their senses.
Right, we go to the vote on this.
Chairman,
Leader.
I take exception of what Councillor Petroni said, because he referred to a correction of a press statement that he had put out. and I wasn't going to refer to this, but I need to share at this point. I am absolutely disgusted by elements of the press release.
Councillor, we finished debate, I'm sorry. The summing up has taken place, and we do need to proceed to the vote now, because this debate is now ended, and we go to the vote. And so I ask all those in favour of the amended motion as agreed. Yeah, this is the substantive motion, sorry. As amended. Yes. Yeah. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's clearly carried. And we move on to the next item on the agenda. And I would remind councillors that when we're debating issues, it's according to the motion and not individual attacks on each other. There's been several today in this chamber, and really we should be debating the issues and not personal attacks. So please keep that in mind for the future. So we now move on to item 8, and that's the report of the Chief Officer, Enterprise, Monmouthshire Business Growth and Enterprise Strategy. I call on Cabinet Member Bob Greenland.
Thank you, Chair. One of the 3 priorities of this council is business growth and job creation. And it's quite right that it is one of the strategies of the council, one of the main priorities. Because if we are to have a prosperous and resilient county, we must have jobs for our citizens. Monmouthshire is often said to be one of the most prosperous counties in Wales, and in many ways it is. But at the same time, it also has some of the lowest wage earners in the whole of Wales. And of course the reason is that those people who are prosperous are mainly working outside the county, not within the county. And we do suffer from a lack of suitable jobs for many of our young people as they grow up. In my own case, my 3 children are no longer living in the county because they can't find jobs in their specialities in the county. If we want a complete county, and a complete county with a working population, then we do have to create jobs. If we don't, then our aging population will get older, and the average age will get older, and the pressure on our social services will get greater. We do need young people to find jobs in this county. And to do that, we really need to be helping as far as the council is concerned. We do need a growth strategy. We haven't had one since about 2008, I think, and it's over time now that we adopt a proper strategy that actually looks for the creation of jobs in the years to come. This document that you've got in front of you was put into draft form earlier this year. It's been out to consultation, both internally and externally, and as a result of those consultations, amendments have been made to give you the document that we've got in front of us this afternoon. And as you can see from the strategy, it has been endorsed by the past chairman of the Monmouthshire Business Club. In fact, in addition to that, just in the last few days, we have had a letter from the Abergavenny Business Club, that one was from. We've also had a letter from the Abergavenny Chamber of Commerce and Business. And just to, well, whatever it is. And just to quote from that, he says, in the introduction to the report presented to the meeting, that's this meeting today, it states one of the Monmouthshire County Council's 3 core strategic priorities is supporting enterprise, entrepreneurship and job creation. We are pleased that despite budget cutbacks, that this objective remains a focus of the Council. It's also reassuring that in 2014 we will have in place a detailed document on economic development, something that has been lacking since the last economic development plan ran out in 2008. We fully support the choice in Section 4 of tomorrow's Monmouthshire's 5 pillars to success, and in Section 5, the 3 strategic priorities. One of the most important of these is inward investment, and the creation of a professionally produced inward investment website will, we believe, be the cornerstone to attracting inward investment. We therefore commend this report to the Council and look forward to helping assisting County Council officers achieve the objectives stated therein. So another ringing endorsement of what we have in front of us today. I know that it's been through internal scrutiny as well, and I think just before we actually ask the Head of Commercial and People Development, Peter Davis, to present a short presentation to us on the strategy, I'm going to ask, if I may, the Chair of the Economy and Development Select, Councillor Sarah Jones, to make a few comments, Chair.
I'll allow that. Councillor Jones.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the paper in front of us today, not only do we really welcome this, it's more that it highlights the effectiveness, in my opinion, of the scrutiny process. So in this paper we can see how scrutiny can really add value to our democratic structure and how all of us as individual members can have a role in terms of influencing strategy. So our committee highlighted the importance of infrastructure, for example, and the linkages with developments such as the Cardiff City region. And I know because of these recommendations, this has been bolstered within the report that's come in front of us today. Our committee wanted this strategy to be led by the business sector, not just owned by the council officers and the council members. And as such, we now see a forward, as Councillor Greenland has mentioned, from the business sector. So this has emphasised the importance of the linkages with external engagement. Our committee was very much concerned about the capacity of our council to deliver, given the number of the sort of ambitious, if you like, elements of the report. And following these concerns, a third post was created and added to the team. So due to our concerns over the current efficacy in terms of signposting and support for existing and new business, this post will now focus on this area of navigation and support for new and existing business. Our committee highlighted the demographic topography and environment in terms of our approach to the business landscape. And we noted the geographical positioning and our inability to offer grants and tap into grants that are available. Due to these comments that have been made, we now see that this strategy reflects the elements of the local development strategy, and indeed the local development strategy itself has had some of these concerns reflected within it. So all of these are elements that have shown that the democratic process has really been effective in this whole engagement. We've actually given comments that have been adopted into the strategy that you now see in front of you today. I just wanted to add as well, in my role as Chair of the Economy and Development Select Committee, I feel like we're seeing an increasing number of coordinated papers and approaches that are coming forward through the strategies that are being presented. iCounty, the local development strategy, our event strategy, the destinations management plan, and this strategy itself are all showing very much a coordinated approach, working together to support enterprise, business development and job creation within our county. So I present that to you and look forward to having the results from the engagement cycle process come forward, and also in terms of addressing some of the challenges that our county faces through the implementation of the strategy.
Councillor Greenland, do you want to introduce the officer?
Just to say finally, before Peter Davis gives us the report, a strategy is excellent, but it's absolutely no good if it then sits on a shelf and stays there. So equally important to the strategy is an action plan that can make sure that this doesn't gather dust, that it does make a real difference. And at that, Chairman, I'd ask Peter Davis if he would give us the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. Good afternoon, Peter. Welcome. If you could just state your official title for the viewers and then proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Davis. I'm the Head of Commercial and People Development here at the Authority. Thank you ever so much for the introduction. And thank you very much, Councillor Greenland, Councillor Jones, for those remarks. In a sense, it's stolen a little bit of my thunder and introduction, but that's no problem whatsoever. Shortens my time up here. But to echo some of Councillor Greenland's comments in the first instance, absolutely, this is one of the strategic bedrocks of the council, certainly in terms of enterprise, business growth and job creation. Hugely important that this strategy is refreshed. But equally important, touching on Councillor Jones's comments, you know, this clearly needs to reflect the needs of our business community. And it was very, very important that when we released this strategy out in draft back in July, that it was what it said on the tin draft. It was very, very important that we went through due scrutiny internally, but equally that we engage with all our key business partners in terms of Business Wales, Centre for Business, and of course our chambers locally. And we've had some excellent feedback, all of which has contributed to the strategy that is presented in front of you today. Further to that, this strategy does in fact sit very closely and alongside the local development strategy that Councillor Jones just referenced. The Rural Development Programme is a key funding source for us, and it will allow us to deliver elements of this strategy across the county. We are of course delivering this from a very small and dedicated team, and as has been touched on, we have just enhanced the capacity within that team. That is absolutely necessary for us to deliver on all fronts on this strategy. There may well be instances in future that we will have to bring business cases forward through Cabinet or, if necessary, into Council, but that will take place as we push the strategy forward. And certainly in terms of the action plan and Councillor Greenland's latter remarks, the action plan is what really is key for this for me. We will be ensuring that this progress with the action plan is brought back for scrutiny on a 6-monthly cycle. It's very, very important that is kept in check, and we make sure that we deliver on all fronts the outcomes that are required, and certainly the business community require us to deliver. So I'm just going to hand over to Kath Fallon, who is the Head of Economy and Enterprise, who's just going to take you through a very short presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. We can see from the date of the strategy that it's actually 2014 to 2020. This aligns directly with the local development strategy that we've written for rural development. So the reason is that these have to twin track in order that we can use some of the funds, as Peter said, from the Rural Development Programme to help us deliver on this. In terms of the purpose of the strategy, as we said, the last one was produced in 2008, but really at a unique time of opportunity. We have a new team in place with new funds, and also the new European funds are actually starting to kick in as well now. So it's exactly the right time for us to be doing this. We also need to provide ourselves with some strategic context and direction for our activities. And whilst doing that, we need to understand the needs of our businesses, because there's no point in us delivering the services that our businesses don't want or don't need. And we need to be able to flex that and to make it adaptable as we go through these next few years. So how do we start the process? Really, we opened up conversations, as anybody does, but really on a one-to-one basis initially. As Peter says, we're a very new team, and we had to go and meet these people. We enjoyed actually going and meeting these people and finding out what the issues were on the ground, and we needed to ensure the strategy we produced was actually fit for purpose. So we met them on a one-to-one basis. We then did joint chamber meetings and conversations, and then went out to the wider business community, and also did one-to-ones with our business support partners, because we want to ensure we're not duplicating a service. As we all know, our budgets are minimal, and we need to ensure we're all getting best value for money. So we need to be able to refer clients on, but also to understand how that client is developing, to ensure that we can be there to help them through the process and to move forward and to create those jobs that we all need. In terms of the context for our conversations, our mission really is to build the enterprise capacity to reinvent our future. That is completely aligned with the Enterprise Directorate's mission as well. But part of that, we recognised quite early on that there were 3 key pillars. One was supporting our existing businesses and to help them to grow. The other really was encouraging inward investment, as has been mentioned by Monmouth Chamber, and the need to develop a really good web portal to actually entice those businesses in. But one, to cultivate and grow our entrepreneurs and to work with our education colleagues in the 21st Century Schools programme to show that setting up your own business is achievable, it can be done. There are alternatives, whether it be apprenticeships or or setting up your own business as opposed to just going to university or that being. So we want to show there's many different options for school children these days. In terms of the timelines, it's been quite short, but actually it's been good because it's been focused. So we started in July, we held conversations throughout the summer, But also we were undertaking a wider public engagement process at the time for the Rural Development Programme and the Local Development Strategy. So we were out at the various rural shows, drop-in sessions, online surveys, and all the time we were testing the Local Development Strategy with the Economic Development Strategy and Enterprise Strategy to make sure that we were bringing things together. We then, as Sarah said, went to scrutiny, and the engagement cycle closed in October. We pulled together all the information that we had, and the redraft and final copy is now in front of you today. So what did we achieve? As far as we're concerned, this is a living strategy. As Bob says, we don't just want to actually put it on a shelf and forget it. Sorry, Councillor Green. And we want it to be a true reflection of our future business needs. We also want it to help us guide our bespoke service to ensure that we're not just taking a point in time now, the fact that we're growing and flexing as time goes on. And also really that we adapt to the needs not only of the businesses but also to the authorities, so we can make sure that we're all coming together to achieve the maximum that we can. In terms of the next steps, we're putting the action plan onto a Trello board. I realise it's quite a small document in terms of where that is at the moment in your papers. So we want something that's online where people can actually drop in and out and check how progress is actually moving ahead. And also this will be adapted as we go forward to ensure, again, that we're moving and flexing our service. And we also expect then to produce 6 monthly reviews of the strategy to make sure the performance indicators that we've included in the strategy are being achieved and that we're moving forward and people can actually see the impact that the service is having. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Okay, councillors, I've got Councillor Jim Higginson to ask a question. Councillor Farley and then Councillor Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate and I listened to the comments that the Deputy Leader had to make, and the bit that concerns me, and it's on item 3 of this particular report, today's Monmouthshire, 3.2, and he speaks about Monmouth's geographical position, but the position that I'm concerned with is the fact that in 2011, the average weekly wage was £452. In 2012, we went down to 438, and in 2013, it dropped further to 427. Now, that's over that 3 years, that's £25 a week. And the appreciation is average. There's a lot of people above, but there are people below that average as well, and they would feel the consequences of lower wages worse than the ones who are higher than that. So the question I want to ask is this: and I appreciate the fact that this has been detected by the team and it's a good report, but how can we combat this? The lower wage people, they've suffered a £25 a week drop in their earning power in 3 years. So I would hope we'll be looking forward, and you may or may not give me an answer, but it's possible you might have an idea as to what the cause of the problem is. Thank you.
Yes, officers, you may answer.
Very much the answer to this is, I think, in the 3 pillars of our strategy. I don't think that there is one single answer. So in terms of what Kath touched on earlier, the ongoing business support that needs to be provided to our existing businesses to grow and actually to bring in some of those higher value positions into the organisation. Certainly in terms of growing entrepreneurs and allowing them to flourish. And it's not necessarily a case that we have a very high proportion of micro enterprises and small businesses in this county, and certainly if we can provide them a platform to actually start up and actually to grow again, that can only be good, certainly for average wage levels. And then finally, I think, and we've touched on it a few times, inward investment. If we can properly showcase the authority and appreciating the fact that we are at a slight disadvantage to other authorities who are able to attract businesses in due to the subsidies and grants that they're able to offer. But if we can certainly showcase the authority for what we all know it is, and we can attract some of those businesses into the county, again, that can only be good for average wage levels.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank all concerned for this report. I do, however, think that there is a missing opportunity for joining up, which I would like to be assured can be taken even at this stage. And the opportunity is something like this. This is the second time this week that I've been in this chamber looking at some very important, highly significant plans for our authority. The one I've minded to recall was actually the beginning work, the more than beginning work, on a local transport plan, which Richard Cope and other colleagues are working on. It would appear to me that actually, somewhere down the line, the various teams working on this plan and that plan, and the two cabinet members, Councillor Greenland and Councillor Jones, could usefully find a way of engaging together. Because this is all very well, but there's more to infrastructure than broadband, as you acknowledge. And crucial in that is going to be the development within the limits that we can work within of our transport infrastructure, with all its implications both for business and the people who live here and hopefully will live here as they seek to go to work. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. We're quite heavily involved in the apprenticeship scheme, and actually part of that, one of the major issues is how we get young people from A to B, so we're very aware of the issues of transport. We're also aware of the Cardiff City Metro that's being mentioned as well at the moment. And yes, you're quite right. Enterprise and economic development goes right across all those different strategies. We were aware of that, and we've picked that out through our reference to the local development plan. There's also been an advantage of working sort of twin tracking really the enterprise strategy with the local development strategy for the rural development programme funding. So we are where we, obviously where we can bring in these strategies together. So I absolutely take your point.
Councillor Armand Watts.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about super fast broadband, and my concerns, which I've voiced in Economy and Development, is the uncertainty of when we roll this out, how it will affect my ward, for example, which has the New Ayres Farm Estate, which has a notable business, Fairfield Maybe, a well-known local business of bridge builders. I'm concerned, we've picked up information before that they might not get the first run through of super fast broadband, and my worry would be that the existing businesses we have will look elsewhere to other counties that have it. What can you do to assure me and all of us in this room and all the public that are watching it on YouTube tomorrow or live now, or probably all 10 of them out there, that will that this is maybe not. That we are really kind of got to grips with this and ensure that they will have this sooner than later. And the other point I wanted to make is about self-employment. You talked about self-employment and micro businesses, and if you look at other authorities, Wigan historically I think was deemed as being in England one of the authorities of best practice. Pushing forward entrepreneurs, has supported them through that first 2 years, which is a difficult period. They put their money where their mouth was. Yeah, they helped support those financially. They give them mentors, business, if you like, business gurus, and supported them that way. Is there anything in you of any substance where we're going to look at that? And my final question is: do you believe that I know you're going to have to decide, not answer this question, but do you believe that the existing budget that you've got is strong enough to go forward, which I think are excellent measures? I think that everybody on this side would agree that they're very, very go-getting, they're very entrepreneurial, and it's what Monmouthshire needs. But do you honestly think that you've got sufficient budget to see this through?
I'll answer the questions in the order that they've been presented. Certainly in terms of Superfast Cymru and the significant investment that is being put forward by BT, of course, in conjunction with Welsh Government and European funds, that will see a significant change in the broadband infrastructure and landscape, not just in Monmouthshire, but across Wales. I've had reassurances from both Welsh Government and BT of late, certainly from BT, that they will be looking to honour the conditions within that contract, which will, as many of you will have seen in the press, will see Wales have 95% coverage in terms of superfast broadband by June 2016. I've every confidence at the moment in terms of the deployment schedule that they're starting to work through, that they're going to look to hit those targets. And I know that Welsh Government alongside that is looking to bring additional schemes in alongside and in parallel to that to try and address the other 5%. I think that's hugely exciting. It's hugely exciting for Wales. It's hugely exciting for Monmouthshire particularly. As I touched on earlier, the fact that we have got a significant number of micro businesses and small enterprise, a lot of home workers, and a lot of those small businesses actually operate from home. So the broadband infrastructure in this day and age is hugely important. But as I said, I'm very comforted in terms of the information I'm having shared of late. We will be bringing, and Councillor Watts, you will know, we brought a presentation through Select Committee a few months ago concerning broadband rollout. And we will be looking to bring a report back through Cabinet shortly to provide further update. So that was in terms of the first question. In terms of the situation with the budget, I think, and certainly in terms of the recent addition that we've made in the team, of course I'm going to answer the question to say that yes, I'd love a team of 20 or 50. That's not going to happen. I think one of the things that we can be very pleased about is that we've got a very highly skilled and a very small team. They're very enterprising in their nature, as you'd naturally expect. I think the key to it actually is, and Kath touched on it in her presentation, it's how we actually work alongside others. Certainly in terms of other business partners, in terms of the chambers, but actually in terms of members of our business community who are certainly prepared to dispose of their time and are disposing of their time to help and support us in delivery on this strategy. The Rural Development Programme is, I guess, a key jewel in the crown in all of that. That brings a significant amount of funding to the table over a 5-6 year period. And we just have to be enterprising in terms of our ability to access funding, not just through the Rural Development Programme, but beyond that. Sorry, Councillor Watts, there was a second. Could you sorry, Councillor Watts, could you just
I'm struggling to remember myself now, but essentially, I think you've kind of answered it really. What did you think that on? It was. I guess it was. You'd answered it in as much as that I was asking about self-employment, about encouraging and mentoring self-employed people over a 2-year period or whatever, and whether or not we had sufficient. And you've answered that saying, well, basically, you could obviously do with a bit more support, really financially. That's my understanding of it. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I think the one further thing to add, and it is referenced in the action plan, we are currently working through and trying to progress potential for. Many of you will know from the feedback that we had from Monmouth Engages, the very first round of that, there was a lot of interest in a Monmouth lottery concept. And we've had research undertaken on that in conjunction with the University of South Wales. We've had that report back recently, and that is presenting a range of options, one, of course, of which is a straight lottery option, but actually a very interesting option that concerns crowdfunding solutions, which on first read of it looks very well aligned to the authority, and certainly in terms of the social capital and wealth that exists in this county. So we again will shortly be bringing a report through Cabinet, and hopefully that will allow us to provide a means by which businesses can actually look to secure finance to actually develop their businesses outside of the traditional funding and financing routes. And in terms of the point around mentoring, and it's very much the discussions that we've been having recently, it's our ability to actually wrap some support around that for businesses who are looking to either start up or to grow.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Petruni.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, and we support it entirely. We do need good jobs in Monmouthshire and definitely increase the wage levels for all workers. I have some technical questions, if I may. First one is on success indicators. I know there's going to be an action plan that's gone like Microsoft Project. Are those success indicators going to be on the data hub as well, so we can scrutinise all those indicators you've suggested, so we can? And On that, growing entrepreneurs, I noticed that Success Indicator says number of new businesses, startups. Is that going to be directly correlated to the work we've done, or just startups generally? How will we make that connection between the work we've done with the startup? Otherwise, are we trying to take credit for someone who's just done it off their own back? And I noticed that a lot of this hinged on the money of the RDP. It's not a flippant question, it's actually really serious. If, God forbid, the Tories take over again in 2015, and they do a referendum on Europe and we're out, what effect, have we put any contingency into effect of what that will have on this plan, taking all the money out of it?
I'll answer the first question first while I'm thinking of the answer to the second one. I think you're absolutely right in terms of the point that you make around measures. And what I will say is that I think the measures that are currently contained and sat within the action plan are what I would call probably a first cut of those measures. Attribution, which is the key issue within all of this, is something that we've really got to get beyond because there are a range of indicators that tell the story in terms of the health of the economy in Monmouthshire. And certainly for us, we've got to get a lot better in terms of identifying some of those very clear outcome-based measures, those ones that actually show that you've actually undertaken activity here, disposed of resource and effort, and there is clear outcome and clear attribution in terms of the effort and activity that you've put forward. So, as I said, it's a first cut in terms of the measures at the moment. We will be developing far better outcome-based measures, specifically targeted around the work that we're going to be looking to undertake. In terms of the second question,
Officers, this is a hypothetical question, and I don't think it's fair to answer a hypothetical question.
Can I just rephrase it? In the event we're out of the European Union, have we got any contingency plans for the withdrawal of that funding then? I mean, have we even thought about it, of the consequences to the programme and to this council?
Okay, right. Well, it is a political question, and frankly, if you're going to ask a political question, I'll give you a political answer. And that is that if you vote Conservative, you will get an option about whether we stay in the European Union or not.
Councillors, please. This is not a political debate here.
A democratic point of view. You have a democratic opportunity.
Please, order. Please take your seats, everybody. Please. It's not about politics here. We are debating the Monmouthshire plan of enterprise. You've asked a question. Is there a contingency plan? The answer would be yes or no. Could I ask the officer to answer, and then we'll move on. The Chief Executive would like to offer an opinion.
And you'll be pleased to know it'll be a technical answer. And the easiest thing to say is, do you know what? No. Is it quite a significant part of that answer? I think if you know, whatever the political process that follows, if we find ourselves as a nation unable to attract the European funding that is currently available, I think it's all bets are off for Wales, actually, not just Monmouthshire. I think at all levels of government, we'll just have to sit down and have a rethink about what's possible and what isn't. Yes, for us, we're particularly interested in the Rural Development Plan. You know that. You know that we don't qualify, we never have qualified as a convergence area. Actually, that's good news, isn't it, in so many ways? Because some of the characteristics that define convergence areas, you just wouldn't want to be. So I'm not prepared to live with a chip on my shoulder on that one. I think increasingly we also need to cast our eye on perhaps some of the other European funding pots that far too few people in the UK even think about or know exist. You know, the big money, in my view, isn't in convergence. It's not an RDP. It's actually in something called Horizon 2020, which is about recreating a manufacturing base for Europe. So, I guess the the concluding remark I would make is that regardless of the political affiliations of this nation or the UK, such a decision, if taken, couldn't be operationalised overnight. So we would have a little while to get used to a new environment, and I suspect that that little while would be at least concurrent with the term of our plan. So we haven't got a no. No is the answer to your question, but I think no is okay, because I don't think that the source, or one of the sources that we can have absolute certainty, I think, that the source that we're relying on will be with us for the lifetime of the plan.
Right, I've got Officer Peter Davis to give you an opinion, and then I go to Councillor Down.
Just to add one further point of, I guess, reassurance and comfort, certainly in terms of the strategy that's been brought in front of you today. The action plan that is appended to that strategy, we intend to deliver that within our existing resource. That is separate to any funding that is coming in for the Rural Development Programme. So hopefully that gives you a level of comfort and reassurance. The local development strategy sits almost alongside it. It is, I guess, it is a block of funding that will allow us to supercharge delivery on the strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Graham Down.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Perhaps before I start with what I was planning to say, I could pick up on some of the points which have already been made. The first point, I think, came from Councillor Higginson about low wages in the county. Of course, the principal reason for that is that we are so dependent on areas like agriculture and hospitality, which are notoriously low payers. The fact that low wages are paid to people working in Monmouthshire is not the same as saying that people in Monmouthshire earn low wages. That's because Monmouthshire is, to a substantial degree, a commuter land, and people move out of the county in order to work. Personally, I don't see a problem with that, but others do. It links in, of course, to the fact that it is essential that we have first-class transport links, as raised by Councillor Farley. The south of the county in particular is a fantastic place to be. We've got the M4 running to London. We have the M5 just down the road, which leads up to the Midlands and the north and down to the southwest. And we have, by and large, good rail links between South Wales and particularly London. Now, that's not to say that those can't be improved. They should be improved. They must be improved. The electrification of the line is going to be great. We need to have things like a mega station and so on, and better connections throughout. But let's not run away with the fact that or pretend that we don't have great transport links already. Of course, in the future, in terms of road transport, we need some form of M4 relief road. I must say I'm at the point of almost saying, I don't care what it is, just do something. Although I know Councillor Taylor will probably lynch me for saying that. And we need, of course, something to be done about the Severn Bridge tolls as and when the bridges return to public ownership. And I never thought I'd hear myself saying these words, but I actually agree with the Liberal Democrats that ideally they will be toll-free. And to pick up the point about broadband, absolutely critical, particularly because we are in competition with Gloucestershire and Herefordshire, which have the Fastershire schemes in place. So our immediate neighbours have much better connectivity than we do, and we really can't afford to wait very long. It's critical in its own right, and it's critical in competitive terms. Now to turn to what I was intending to say, and that's, first of all, I have heard very little from this authority about support for Small Business Saturday on the 6th of December. I hope it will be widely supported by the authority and by individual members. The commitment, I think, is to spend £10 in an independent shop on that day. I hope we'll all do. Small businesses are absolutely critical to the county, but also to the nation in general. Now, I welcome the strategy. I think there are a lot of good things in it, and I'm grateful to those who've been involved in its formulation. I think one of the things I would say about dealing with businesses is it has to be a bottom-up approach. Far too often at national level, for example, we see governments, whether it's in Westminster or here or in Cardiff, saying we will provide you with a grant to buy laptops or something like that, which is a lot of use if what you actually need is a lathe. And we must listen to what businesses have to say rather than what politicians think businesses should have. Small businesses, particularly micro businesses, are notoriously difficult to deal with or to connect with. They fall into the category of difficult to reach sometimes. They don't get involved with Chambers of Commerce. They don't get involved with the Institute of Directors. They don't get involved with the Federation of Small Business. They're far too busy running their own affairs. So we have to find a way of connecting with those micro businesses. And whilst I welcome the connection with Chambers, etc., don't forget you're not talking to the business community when you're talking to Chambers. You're just talking to a very small selection. I'd like to see us working closely with other organisations such as the Prince's Trust, which have funding available for particularly young people setting up in business. I'm disappointed there's no mention of that in the plan. I would hope that is an oversight and that we are working or will be working very hard with such organisations in the future. I'd like to see us developing more business mentors. It's often the case that someone may be a very good cook, so they open a restaurant. But when they open that restaurant, they're not just there to display their art, they're actually about running a business which needs to be done profitably. And sadly, there isn't often enough support for people, not in the fact that they can't, just use that example, the fact that they can produce a decent plate of food, but in running the business profitably, cash flow and so on, those are things which they need support. And I'm sure there are perhaps retired or experienced, at least, business people who would be prepared to give their time to act as mentors to small businesses. We need training for prospective startups. I know Venture Wales, when they were involved with us, did some of that. Absolutely essential for the reasons that I've just mentioned. Finally, I turn to the issue of funding for small businesses. I'm delighted to hear about crowdfunding because I think that has a possibly significant, but certainly a part to play. I am less convinced about a lottery. I think people would far rather buy lottery tickets if they thought the money was going to a good cause, such as education or social services or something, rather than business, which people just don't tend to understand. In last year's budget, I made a proposal that the council could use some of its reserves to make small, secured loans to businesses. Whilst that seemed to meet with some support, it was in the event voted down, but I think it is an idea which needs further work, and I think it's an idea with the time for which has come. So all in all, I welcome, of course, the document. I think there's far more to be done, and I'm glad you refer to it as a living document, because it's very much a toddler at the moment, and I look forward to it being at least a teenager.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the officers like to respond in any way, or shall I go on to the next councillor? Briefly, yes, go on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Down. I think you've made quite a number of very pertinent points there, and I'm pleased and quite comforted actually that a number of the things that you've touched on are featuring in our action plan, and certainly a number of the key areas that we need to look to lean into and address. Just a few things. I'm not going to go through all the points, but certainly into your point around mentors is a very fair and valid one. We have an existing mentor database already that we are looking to capitalise on now, and I guess it goes back to some of the earlier comments that we've referenced about, and the points that you've just made. You know, we've got a lot of out commuting. We've got a lot of high-value individuals who situate themselves within our county, and you know, certainly we can lean into that to allow them to assist other businesses to grow. Certainly in terms of broadband, the only point I wanted to make on broadband, and it's very much coming through, I think, Welsh Government's experiences of late, and very much why they're looking to bring some funding forward now around an ICT exploitation programme for businesses, because it's all well and good having the infrastructure there, but if businesses don't see the benefit of that infrastructure, or don't see see how they can actually exploit that infrastructure, then that's not going to deliver any outcome at all. So the ICT exploitation programme is very much intended to be on the ground, tailored around the business needs of our specific county and others in Wales. And certainly it'll be a case that we'll be looking to work with Welsh Government on that to help businesses understand the clear benefits from broadband infrastructure and to realise its potential. In terms of the point that you make around micro businesses, I think on a number of fronts, I think points that actions that we've clearly got laid out in our joining action plan will hopefully look to bring together some of those links with micro businesses. We're looking at a business hub concept at the moment. We're currently going through business case development stage at the moment. And looking to explore as to whether we create space within our towns which allows micro businesses to come together for some of that mentoring to be wrapped around that, to allow some of the business networks that I guess aren't clearly in place at the moment to develop. We're also looking to capitalise on existing business networks, and certainly around running events and training for businesses, allowing businesses within Monmouthshire to come together better. And the final point then, and I guess this is going back slightly to broadband, is around the Super Connected Cities programme. Monmouthshire is benefiting now from a recent change that's been made by DCMS. Some of you may know that cities like Newport and Cardiff have benefited from some significant investment from DCMS and Whitehall. Due to the slow take-up, and that's not just in Newport and Cardiff, but actually nationally, of the voucher scheme, they are looking to actually expand the boundary now beyond, in this instance, the Newport boundary. That boundary is being extended by 5 miles, and it actually allows businesses probably from about Usk down in the county to benefit from this scheme, where they will be able to access up to £3,000 on the voucher scheme to actually get a high-speed broadband connectivity into their businesses. It equally applies to businesses that are of course working from home as well. So that's very interesting, and we're going hard at that at the moment because. We're actively going out at the moment. Where we've been in Mega this week, generating awareness with businesses, and existing timelines on the funding is the existing timelines for the funding with DCMS is that the funding will come to an end at the end of March. But I'm hopeful that they will see sense and they will extend that timeline to allow us to properly capitalise on that scheme.
Right, I've got Councillors Easton, then Blakeborough, and then Hobson. So, Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. And I must leave shortly. I've got a governor's meeting in 10 minutes. I'll be rushed to get there. My question relates to Councillor Higgins' initial question and the supplement with Councillor Down brought up. It's regarding the earnings across the county, which are at the moment about £22,000 a year for full-time earnings, as opposed to, I think, the national average is £26,000 a year. Biggest problem that I see in our county, in our part of the county, is a proliferance of part-time work which some carry 0 hours contracts. It's creating a situation for youngsters who cannot get off the benefits situation. They can't afford to take jobs because then they're worse off. Do you have any statistics across Monmouthshire as to the numbers of people who are stuck in part-time work, in a position of barely getting the minimum wage, some not getting anywhere near the living wage. Do you have any statistics to indicate that in terms of the fact that, yes, we've got full-time employment, but we've got a lot of people who just haven't got that full-time employment to give them a good standard of living?
Yes, that information is available, I guess, like many data sets that we've got at our disposal at the moment, we're currently working through that information. So if that is information that you're keen to receive, I can certainly look to extract that.
Well, I think it's important because we've recently had developments in the south of the county, and one of the reasons why you can't take jobs there is because it's not paying enough money for them to get off that problem we got.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Debbie Blakeborough.
Thanks. I'll make this brief because quite a lot of these points have already been made. First of all, to echo Councillor Farley's comments on the relationship between this strategy and the transport plan for Monmouthshire. And I was just sitting here and I just wrote, good transport links and infrastructure opens up the arteries for a healthy economy, so you can't actually have one without the other. And just wondering at this stage whether, when the draft comes through, that it can go through the economy and development scrutiny as well. Just keen to really push this forward in terms of getting investment from the Welsh Government so that we are not missed out, because we do sit nicely between two good cities, Bristol and Cardiff, and if we could be central to that, that would be all the better for our residents. The other area I wanted to look at, and again, Councillor Watts brought this up, and supported with Councillor Down about a broadband. It's, because I do still keep asking the question, have we got the infrastructure to support what we want to do, our vision as an I-county? You were saying that you are hopeful, assured that the Welsh Government will come up with the goods. I'm heartened by that, but I'm really not convinced on a promise. When we look back, it was interesting you're saying that work's going into convincing businesses to take up broadband. I was under the impression, at least a year ago, businesses were there ready to take it on, but it wasn't fast enough, so they moved over to England. And so to me, there doesn't seem to be any convincing to be had, really. I was also informed that if it was up to the commercial sector to make the decision who would have come first in the rollout, Monmouthshire would have been one of the first 3 authorities, and we are now the last. So the cabinet setup suggests that we would get 76% coverage. And again, is there anything we can do, because it is putting pressure on the Welsh Government to, at the very minimum, ensure that we are at 76% with the rest of Wales, but really what we need to be looking for is funding to support 100% coverage to connect.
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments at all?
Only briefly, Chair. In terms of the point around broadband, Select Committee via the presentation, but we'll be aware that we had a study undertaken earlier on in the year, and that and absolutely that was giving some indications at that point that the rollout across Monmouthshire would see 76-78%, I think was the percentage that was referenced in that report. If for anything, it did serve one purpose, because as soon as BT and Welsh Government became made aware of that report, I was very quickly jettisoned down into Welsh Government for a one-on-one and very long meeting with senior officials there. That's allowed me to capture a huge amount of insight in terms of the nature of the contract. And I can't share all of that information certainly here today, but suffice to say that I am incredibly comforted that the deployment plans that BT now need to take forward, the conditions and the clauses within that contract, the penalty clauses in effect, it would be remiss in fact of BT not to be able to honour and deliver on those. So that certainly gives me those degrees of comfort. And whilst I cannot categorically say in terms of what the percentage will end up with, because the way that the contract has been put in place is that they have to deliver on average a 95% coverage across Wales. So of course some authorities may be slightly above that, some may be slightly below that, but as I referenced earlier, Welsh Government have recognised that and they are bringing other funding in, and alongside that other schemes, infill projects to look to address the shortfall.
Right, I've got Councillor Phil Hobson.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I have to ask, the cover of the report is interesting because you show the Severn Bridge with the nice sun. Now, if you're looking west, its sun is setting. I actually don't think that's the case. I think the sun is rising. And it does beg the question, what do we do with tolls in 2017, as Councillor Down has eloquently put, and I'd thank him for that. Lots of points I always wanted to make have already been made, but I want to just highlight on a few things, which is the difference between the macro needs, macro business needs, and small business needs. Those who are macros are basically going to be very IT or consultancy based. They're going to be working from home, they're on their own. They're already connected, they're already out there making the connections and bringing in the business. It's the small to medium-sized enterprises that need the support and the encouragement to move ahead. There is a reinvention for the high street coming. There's a bright future for the high street definitely out there. Why else would the likes of Google and Facebook and Twitter be holding huge amounts of webinars and meetings and consultations and free training? It's all free, it's available, you just join together. Why are they doing that? Why are they offering, what's the big thing this year is online mobile payments. Why are they doing that? Because the big business model actually isn't going to work in a digital age. I only have to mention one monolith of a company which has already suddenly found itself in problems. It's called Tesco. You thought a company like that wouldn't be in trouble very quickly? It is. Why? Because people are snapping at their heels. Smaller companies are going to be more agile, they're going to be more inventive, they're going to be more responsive to their customers' needs, and that's where Monmouthshire is well placed. So the report does sort of go into that, but there are maybe some holes, and I just want some reassurance today where you're going to go with this, because it's reassuring to hear that this is a dynamic report. It's not something that's going to be on the shelf, and basically that's the way it's going to be. As I've just mentioned, what support is there out there that we can give small businesses to reinvent our high streets, so they can be digital high streets, that they can exploit their coming golden age, because it's going to go full circle. We don't need to replicate what's free out there already. Companies are already throwing services and training and mentoring already out there. We just need to show our businesses where to get that help and support and get them going. It's very important that that happens. Yeah, broadband is okay. 4G is also important. 4G at the moment coverage is basically just north of the M4 corridor in Monmouthshire, and the rest of it is pretty much of a black hole. If you're a business, you just don't need fixed line technology, you need mobile technology, you need 4G. You know, there will be 5G in the years to come, there will be 6G. The thing is Monmouthshire going to be left behind again? Or, as I'm looking on the map now, Abergavenny, Monmouth, doesn't register. It simply doesn't exist on the 4G network. That's got to change. So what are we going to do, and what strategies are we going to put in place in Monmouthshire to make sure that we're further ahead when it comes to the next rollout and development of those new services? It's one thing for a small business or micro business to get connected on broadband. You've got your website, you've got your social media platforms, and suddenly it goes wrong. Some add-on didn't work with something else or was updated, and the system collapses. What you need, therefore, is who fixes it? How do you fix it? And it's called coding. It's called, do you understand, are you conversant in the language that builds and runs that website? You can say HTML, you can say WordPress platforms, you can say CSS. Some of you are going to know what that means. How many people in this chamber could put their hand up and say, yeah, I'm conversant in one of those languages? Because tell you what, that will get you a job. You've got coding skills on your CV, you're going to get a job. So where in education are we training our 10-year-olds not to do spreadsheets? They don't want to do that. They want to code. They want to code like the 10-year-olds in Singapore and Philippines and Vietnam and Malaysia, right? And these kids at 15 are selling their skills online right now at $5 a time. Yeah, and, you know, I'm saying to myself, if these kids can do it, these teenagers can do it, in far-flung places like Albania, Georgia, Ukraine, Syria even, why aren't kids in Monmouthshire able to sell their services and grow businesses from that? That's a micro business. There's the future. We talk about some of the sectors that Monmouthshire could, or business sectors that are going to be developing to the fore in the next decade or so. And we talk about life sciences, biosciences, biotech. Where are we going to compete on that? Which ones are we going to... We can't get everything. We can't sell ourselves to every business sector. So where are our strengths? What can we get? And what can we develop here to get that inward investment? I would say I did a search, Control F for some people, on the document. The word city regions is great, but in South Monmouthshire we overlap. Councillor Down made reference to this again. The word Bristol appears once. Bristol is a powerhouse. It's right on our doorstep, and if we ignore it at our peril. There are enterprise zones. There are powerhouses such as Swindon, Gloucester, Cheltenham is doing exceptionally well. We are at the centre of all these potential powerhouses along the M4 corridor, the ID corridor down to Reading, down to Cardiff, Swansea. We're there. We're right in the centre of it all. So how are we going to market ourselves? I don't see enough of that. I don't want to be too critical, because I think what the most important part of this document is that it's dynamic, it's going to grow, and there is recognition of certain things. Turning to funding, I would say that funding circles and co-funding is really very important. If you're a micro business, you're trying to set up SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprise with fewer than 50 employees, you're going to find it very difficult to get any attractive funding by banks at the moment, and should banks be trusted. As a person that's actually put their money where their mouth is into Funding Circle, I know exactly which businesses I put my money into. They are very low risk because it's small amounts, but everyone comes together as a group. The returns are actually very encouraging. But I'm satisfied and heartened in the knowledge that that's actually helping businesses grow. I would love to be able to put a bit of cash that I've got into a funding circle that grows Monmouthshire business, because people are parochial at the end of the day, but they're also ambitious for where they live. And I'm just wondering what scope is there to do that. I'm not convinced about the lottery angle, Peter, but you convince me otherwise, stronger argument. But I do think that those are the things there for me. On the whole, though, Mr. Chairman, a great cover to the report. I think it's a golden future. The sun is rising, not setting in Monmouthshire. And it's a dynamic report, which is the most important thing. But if some of those questions could be answered today, I'd be quite happy.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the officers like to answer any of those topics?
Hi, yes. In relation to digital high streets, we're actually working with our town teams at the moment and supporting them in funding applications. We've successfully led on one in Abergavenny through the Town Centre Partnership, and they're about to start working on e-commerce bid shortly. And we're also working directly on Super Connected Cities activities with the Caldicot Town team, and the Monmouthshire trailer was down there on Tuesday at the market promoting that scheme. So we are taking those forward, and we'll work with others wherever we can. With regards to 4G, we actually have a meeting next week with planning, so we're hoping to move that forward quickly. There is provision for coding within the iCounty strategy, and very much something that Kelly's taking forward. In terms of the growth sectors and the clusters study, there is a study taking place at the moment on a South East Wales level, and we're very much involved in that, and we look to see where we can take opportunities forward. In terms with Bristol, Gloucester, we couldn't agree with you more. Certainly on the RDP side of things, we've been working with English colleagues for several years now, and we certainly intend to move that forward as we move on. And we're really pleased to hear that you're interested in the peer-to-peer funding and funding circles paper that we've had produced, and we very much look forward to bringing that to you in the future for further discussion.
Okay, thank you for that, officers. I've got Councillor Sarah Jones, and then I'm going to invite Chief Officer Kelly Byrne to make a comment. So if there's no other councillors after that, I will then ask us to receive it. So I'll ask Councillor Sarah Jones.
It's just a very brief request. We know that the contract for Superfast Cymru is worth 425 million. My understanding is that only about 300,000 of that has been spent on demand stimulation, which is quite a low amount. Can we see what assurances there might be that the Welsh Government's going to increase that amount to enable better exploitation? And can we also ask to see a copy of their exploitation strategy to ensure that we can adopt that when Superfast Cymru comes forward into our county?
Absolutely, absolutely. I can bring that information back in front of members, no problem at all.
Right, now I'd now like to invite Chief Officer Kelly Byrne to make a comment, and then finally it'll be the Cabinet Member Bob Greenland just to end the debate.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments from me really to wrap up and to thank Pete and Kath for the tremendous amount of work they've put into developing this strategy. Worked really hard all through the summer, extended the Monmouthshire Engages concept to business, which I think added some real value. But I just want to say that all of this strategy really sits against the backdrop of Monmouthshire actually being the most economically resilient and competitive place in Wales, which I think is really significant when you consider that the lifeblood of our economy is that SME sector, that really important small business sector. And because we don't access convergence monies, we're a competitiveness area. So I think if you can imagine that when we get some of these key objectives in this strategy delivered, I think Monmouthshire could be a real powerhouse, both in the Cardiff capital region and in terms of Seagan into that Sevenside region and the connections with Bristol as well. I think the other point that I wanted to make is we've spoken a lot about the linkages with transport, which are clearly really important. But housing and where it's built also tends to drive the transport market, which then impacts the economic market. And we know in Monmouthshire in particular that people are very keen to trade off longer travel to work times for more affordable housing. So whilst today you're hearing very much about the business growth and enterprise brief, don't forget that in terms of my wider brief and whole place, we've got to bring together the economic links with transport, with housing, with planning. And really those frameworks are going to be so key in bringing all of those key aspects together. The other point I'd make is very quickly about the size of the team and the budgets that are available, because that was quite an important point that was made, I think. And of course, it's a very small team. It was 2 until recently, and now we have 3. And I just want to make the point very clearly that when we call some of these posts managers, so for example, we have an existing business manager, it doesn't mean we're prioritising when we bring you structure reports, manager posts over the front line. They're called managers because those terms resonate with the private sector with which we have to work. It doesn't mean we've prioritised those over frontline workers. There are no frontline workers. There is just those posts. Those structures are that lean. So I think that's quite an important point for us to make as well in terms of conveying that understanding. And the very last thing from me really is we've spent and we've had a really rich and valuable conversation this afternoon about some key principles, business growth. We talked about business discipline and rigour. We've talked about starting up, intellectual property. We've talked about productivity, profitability. And don't forget, those principles are really important in the business sector, but we have to absolutely develop and embed them within our internal enterprise culture, because if we don't, we can't scale the impact that we have to make as a council. So really important in the external world, but don't forget, they must resonate and they must be important in the work that we do too as a council.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Greenland.
Thank you, Chair. I think this has been an excellent debate. We've had some really good words from many of the councillors. Particularly, I want to thank Councillor Hobson for his very thoughtful responses that he made. Not all of them I agree with it, but virtually most of them, I have to say. And indeed, Councillor Downs as well. He also put an excellent response in. The only thing I wouldn't agree with him with, and I'm sure my colleague on the left would probably not agree with him, is the use of reserves for loan funding. If we had enough reserves, it might be a possibility, but I'm sure we would be told that our reserves are on an absolute minimum level anyway. A couple of other things I just wanted to make reference to: the local transport plan, which I understand is very near to completion at the moment. But we are not an island. We have to recognise that travel is outside of the county, in fact across all of Wales, And what we do miss at the moment is a national transport plan. And we really do need to press the Welsh Government to come forward with that national transport plan as soon as they can. Of course, the issue also of wages is absolutely crucial, and the low wages. But of course, we have been through one of the worst recessions that, well, the worst recession that any of us can possibly remember. But we are now beginning to climb. And for the first time ever this month, in fact, this week, we have seen wages rise above the level of inflation. Very, very small at the moment, but at least we are on that right side, and it's to be hoped that we in Monmouthshire will be able to lead actually on those improvement of wage levels for the people who live here. And I think really that's probably all I want to say on the contributions made by members. But I do want to thank officers for the excellent way in which they responded to those questions. Really very good answers they've given, and very full answers. And again, I want to endorse the remarks made by the Chief Officer and thank the officers for this excellent strategy. And finally, just move the recommendations in the report, which are in 2.1 and 2.2. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm minded to take the recommendations en bloc. Do I have a second of that proposal? Councillor Murphy. Okay, councillors, you've all finished your contribution, so could I ask you to signify if you're in favour of receiving and the recommendations? Clearly carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on to the next item on the agenda. Item 9, report of the Head of Policy and Engagement, feedback from the October Monmouthshire Engages events and future engagement strategies. So I'll ask Councillor Hobson to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the report today is to provide feedback to Council from the recent round of Monmouthshire Engages events. That was both in public meetings in the evenings and on the road shows during the day throughout the county. Identifies the strategies that we'll be using to ensure that future engagement and consultations are effective in meeting our legal requirements, but also the County of Monmouthshire's determination to continue being an organisation that will work with all our communities to provide a sustainable and resilient future. So the report basically touches upon those roadshows and the public meetings, the attendance, touches upon Monmouthshire Made Open, the ranking of services that were judged to be most important by residents, and those that were ranked as being least important, which is worth a read. So we're already now looking at the basics, or forming the basics for working on Monmouthshire Engages 2015, the design process for that and for the next stage. I know Will McLean will speak to the report and answer questions on a technical merit.
Thank you. If you introduce yourself, please, Councillor Officer McLean.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Will McLean, Head of Policy and Engagement at the Council. Thank you for your introductory comments, Councillor Hobson. I'm pleased to bring this feedback to full Council. We did have an all-members seminar before we started the Monmouthshire Engages round of events, just to set out the purpose and the various approaches that we would be using this time to begin to engage with our communities about the severity of the budget cuts that we were facing, and really to understand where that sits in this broader budgetary process, but not only that, where it sits in a much broader engagement framework that we're looking to adapt and implement right across Monmouthshire. So the report really just seeks to kind of highlight some of the key issues that occurred during the work. I think one of the things it's right to draw attention to straight away is the attendance at this year's events were substantially lower than last year. And at the bottom of page 3 of the report and the top of page 4, I do begin to just reflect a little bit as to what some of the reasons for that might be. I think on a very kind of personal level, I think, there was a sense of disappointment that we didn't have better attendance. We had worked hard to make sure that publicity was made available earlier this year. The decision to hold the events was taken earlier and communicated to members of the public, our stakeholder networks, and to members earlier. But I think one of the things which became apparent very quickly, when we, particularly in the roadshows, was that the sense of angst and negativity around the settlement that we'd experienced the year previously simply wasn't there. And I think, I don't know what we can put that down to, but there didn't seem to be that level of anguish around the prospective reductions in services. And I think that played out again in the evening sessions as well. So it's difficult to comment on what that might be, and I'm sure others will have a view as to if there are reasons behind it. But I think the events as we went through them certainly reinforced that sense of interest by the people who came to talk, that they were willing to contribute, that they had a wide range of views, that they were wanted to share with the authority. And I think the opportunity to do that was an opportunity well taken, albeit, as I say, the numbers weren't of the extent we had last year. Although I think when I reflect now, I suspect that as we go into the consultation phase and we see the actual mandates that have been proposed, I suspect the second phase, the consultation phase, which was lower last year than the initial phase, we will see a significant number of people attending that. And I think that really kind of leads us on into thinking about what the future of the engagement structure should be. I think broadly there are three considerations for us in terms of the type of engagement and consultation that we can have going forward. And I think a real understanding of the difference between those two aspects, be it engagement and be it consultation, is really important. Because as I have noted in the report, there have been two really very significant court rulings recently around public consultation, particularly for local authorities as they go through difficult periods of reducing services. In one case, the Leicester City Council case, they found for the local authority in terms of what the local authority had done, and that was a positive one because it demonstrated that authorities have to take full account of equalities when making decisions, but they don't necessarily have to put in place replacement services to meet the needs. So that was really important. They just have to make sure they've taken due consideration of it. And the case of the London Borough of Haringey was to do with their council tax reduction scheme. And the challenge there was that their consultation had not adequately shown the level of different options that were available to the council to meet a budget gap as they sought to balance their budget and the schemes that they proposed. And those are both really important things for us to think about as we go into our next stage. Because we're trying to balance up, the advantages of the large-scale community events which we've run in the past and how successful they have been, alongside making sure that we are absolutely clear that we've met all of our legal requirements in very full and proper terms, in terms of proper consultation with people when decisions that are made in this chamber will affect them. So we're having to balance that out. And I think there are probably three scenarios. There's one which is that we maintain an approach that looks a little bit like last year in terms of kind of community-based events. There's a second part which is we don't do the community-based events and we work specifically with those groups of stakeholders and service users who are identified in the service mandates as being affected. Or the third option is that we try and blend those, but find an appropriate balance in that approach. That means that we have the evidence that we've consulted widely enough and appropriately, but also we do continue to kind of hold this high-level conversation with the communities in Monmouthshire about the scale of the challenges that we'll face as we go into the medium term. And that's really, at the heart of what our deliberations are about for that next stage. And I think it's worth again, just reminding ourselves that although there's a lot of focus on Monmouthshire Engages in terms of the budgetary process, there are a whole host of other types of work undertaken. We've already heard kind of really quite fully this afternoon about Monmouthshire engaging with the business community, and just yesterday there was a really extensive event in Caldecott engaging with the staff, at which we had about 1,200 members of staff come together over 3 sessions to hear those really important messages from both the leader and the chief executive, but critically I think for them to be able to kind of share their views about where we're going, how we're doing, are we doing things appropriately, and what they want to test with us and test us on. So I think this is part of a broader piece of engagement. It's part of our kind of commitment to that right across the council. But this next stage will be different. It will be difficult. I have no doubt about that, because the pressures and the legal requirements are that much greater in consultation. But we'll be working with you as members and all of the senior officers in the authority who are responsible for budget mandates to make sure that those expectations are fully met.
Thank you, Will. Right, councillors, anyone like to make a contribution? Councillor Harris and Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting, Will talking about legal requirements. I would like to know myself what those legal requirements are, so that we can possibly help in the drumming up support for any public consultation. The other thing is interesting. Yesterday you had 1,200 staff and you got the opinions of 1,200 staff. In this document here, we've got the opinions of 150 people. It's no way scientific, and we should not in any way come to any major conclusions from 150 people who come out in an evening. You know, if it was pollsters doing it, there are weighted averages here, there and everywhere, taking into account what people earn, etc., what their political views are, and that way you get a statistical argument comes forward. We've got to be very careful basing replies of 150 people. If we can get 1,200 staff, we need to, I know, and I'm not disagreeing, that you did your best to publicise these events. And the only thing you can think of, honestly, is that the public just aren't interested or don't realise the enormity of what's about to hit them. You know, it's, I think it's sad, really, but you know, if we can have a look at the legal bits to actually help the process, I'd be grateful for that.
We've got the monitoring officer.
Yeah. With my legal hat on now. Thanks, Councillor Harris. That's an excellent question. What we need to be to look at is we need to go through a proper consultation exercise. So when we have a proposal, we need to consult with the groups that are affected by this, and we need to take into account the results of those consultation responses and be seen to take into account those consultation responses. So we need to go through a proper consultation exercise and not be seen to just be going through it for the sake of it. So that's the first point on consultation. The second point then is we need to be very careful about the equality characteristics and make sure that anybody affected or likely to be affected by our proposals we consult with, and we take into account those responses and take into account those effects, and if we can, to mitigate the negative effects of our proposed policy. So it's a very, very tricky process, and there are numerous judicial reviews, particularly on the other side of the border, in the last sort of 18 months. But I'm confident that we'll get through it, but it is a tricky process and something that we need to do properly. I hope that's helpful.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few reflections on the events I attended, in no particular order. I think the topic areas you referred to in the report, Will, I thought some of them were confusing and could be a bit conflicting. And I note on page 62 of the bundle, keeping children safe was highlighted as a priority. Yet on the same page, things that weren't important, including trading standards, environmental health. Well, if we think in terms of things like protecting youngsters from, I don't know, perhaps toys that aren't built to the right standard, or highways, for example, safe routes to school. So you can't really separate any of these things. And there's a comment there from a member of the public that they were difficult to rank. So I wonder on that basis why we bothered and what information we actually gained from that, when perhaps there wasn't that wider consideration, certainly within the timescale, about how all those services interlock. I just had a question then about what was the attendance like at the road shows. He does mention the main events. Third point, I think when we present the mandates at the next round of events, there needs to be absolute clarity about how those mandates will affect services on a very local basis. As a ward member, I'm having some representation about what may or may not happen to services like sports clubs, for example, and sometimes it's hard to wheedle out of a larger report where that financial impact may or may not come from. This time I felt unlike last year, and I may be wrong, it didn't feel there was as much advance notice. And I thought, were we using cheap and simple tools like last time, like the letters to pupils in the school bag? I mean, for example, a very easy one would have been at the entrance to Abergavenny by Quick Fit. There's a great what's on board where we could have put Mom Budget Consultation, Leisure Centre, blah blah when it was, but that wasn't there. And the note there at Monmouth Leisure Centre, the 20 people, I think if you took out the people who weren't already aligned to some kind of interest group, and I use that in the broadest sense, there were a good number of town councillors there who had youngsters from the school. But I remember sitting there talking to Ruth, and we looked through, and I think those who were left who weren't part of those groups probably could have had the meeting in a phone box. Another point then, I've had a look on the Torvine website. They've got a budget tool on there. We've seen similar examples in across English counties. Have we considered anything similar? It is quite a crude tool, but it does help to give a bit more flavour and background that people can use in their own time. And I think the last point then is really to thank all the officers who turned up on the evening, because they put an awful lot of effort in and time, and it was a real shame then that there weren't enough people there to take benefit of that. So I hope that we'll be able to rectify it next time. Thank you.
Through the chair. I think just picking up, certainly on Councillor Harris's point, there was certainly no attempt in the paper to claim that that 150 was representative or scientific. I think I actually went so far as to actually state that. So we're really acutely aware of that. In terms of the framework of how we identified the service areas, we did that based on quite a lot of research looking at how similar surveys and so on have been put together, largely by English authorities, and that seemed to be the most kind of aligned areas. Yes, clearly there are parts of services which will impact, and there will always seem to be some of those pieces there. But I think it is fair, some of the things which people don't come into contact with on a very regular basis. I mean, I suspect it's probably not a huge surprise that keeping our children safe came out as the most important kind of aspect for people. But I think it's the frequency with which people contact some of the services that has a disproportionate impact on how people rate them. And that's something which we'll look to reflect upon the next time we do a survey like that. And I think that'll be really important. In terms of the roadshow, it's quite difficult to keep a track of the numbers of the people who are attending those, because people are just passing, stopping and talking, throughout the days. What was really positive about the roadshows, and this is a point I should have made perhaps earlier, is that we were joined at the roadshows by different public service partners. It had been discussed at the local service board. We had a really positive contribution from Anara and Bevan in particular, who used the roadshow to actually conduct a kind of a piece of work that they were looking at in terms of GP survey and standards and so on. So that was positive. So it's difficult to say, but they're normally much better attended, just simply by the nature of the fact that we're normally there for 4 or 5 hours. I agree entirely about the clarity of the message around each of the mandates. We're doing the piece of work at the moment, identifying the key stakeholder groups. Exactly as Rob said, it's really important that you identify the specific users to talk to them. So we're doing that piece of work now. Hopefully, where we can, we'll use existing groups, because that does seem to be the most effective way. But where we need to find new channels to talk to those kind of the people who aren't part of representative groups and so on, and recognising the limitations of using representative groups as well, we will certainly do that. So I think they're all very valid points, and I thank you for those.
Councillor Petroni.
Will's basically answered most of it. I was just saying 0.001% of the population is obviously not good enough. We support engagement, we support your attempts to try and engage. I think the key point is engaging with people where their interest does lie, actually, and that's when they access the service at the council level. So then it relates to their real world rather than this abstract argument which most people just get dissatisfied with. They just think, what's all this bewildering array of... So when they access that service, at that point, if we can capture their view there, I think that would be great, because I think you get a real feel for that. I said it last year, and I'll say it again, and I think you just alluded to it in your last responses. Those people who just, you know, lots of them working, you know, maybe 2 jobs, you know, how do we get to those people who have got little time and lots to do on their plate?
I agree entirely with the accessing or engaging with people at the point which they access services, and we'll look to do that. I mean, sometimes that will be more difficult. For instance, you know, we will have no doubt an extensive piece of work around additional learning week and so on. So we'll have to think very carefully about how we engage the children, how we engage the parents, the staff in the schools and so on. And we've already begun those conversations with Steph from CYP about how we can do that most effectively. So we'll target in that way. Those people, in terms of which time is a great pressure, and that is a kind of a key contributor to, you know, a hidden population. Those people who are very busy, you know, the children being picked up and all those kind of things, and just make sometimes, you know, how you position an event in an evening or a day is very challenging. We're working, and I'm pleased to say Abby has started now with us in terms of our new communication and engagement manager. We're working to think through what those different opportunities might be and how we can do that. It is challenging and it is difficult, but it is really about us, I think this time specifically thinking about those groups who are going to be affected, because that's the challenge. It's the balance between the overall awareness, which is one thing, which is that very early part around information, and that actual really kind of making sure that the people who will be affected understand and have an opportunity to talk to us about the impact.
Right, I've got Councillors Fox, Jones, Watts, Blakeborough, Taylor, Murphy, Edwards. So, Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Will, for speaking to the report and to pulling it together. And let's not beat ourselves up too much about this. First of all, can I thank the public who did take part in all of the elements of consultation, and I'll reflect further on that in a second, and especially reiterate what Giles said to the staff who put in absolute fantastic effort in last year and again this year. It was really a fantastic effort, and they did that all in their own time and at their own expense. So I really do value that, and that shows again that commitment of the staff in this county. And we felt that again yesterday when we met with 1,200 or so of our staff to get a flavour of how they're seeing things, and also an opportunity to share the messages with them. It was disappointing this year that there were a small number of people turned out. We thank them for their contributions, and they are a useful indicator of a percentage of the population and where they're thinking. However, I agree it's not a deep enough probably picture of how everybody is feeling. We must remember that also the other elements of consultation that have gone on in a more targeted approach. And, you know, we had the Disability Forum, for instance, in here, and that's something we'll build on, working with the various groups to understand things better. And there's a lot of work going on also with Alan Burkitt, with various groups within the protected characteristics. There's a lot of work going on there, and we'll maintain that. We did that last year, and we'll do it again this year, very much targeted again. So, you know, consultation isn't concentrated around just these events, which, okay, we would have liked them to have been better supported, but it's also been focused in quite a targeted way. I think the question is now, so how do we take this forward? And to answer those, you know, those options that Will laid on the table. I think there is a place for community and public events. I think there always will be, and there's an opportunity. I think you're quite right, Will. I think the next round of those, when they're focusing on specifics, will have a different attendance, and we need to face up the public, and we're willing to do that in that consultation. So there's a place for that. But I think an enhanced targeted approach is something we also need to welcome or push forward on. And a real strategy around that, of identifying real stakeholder groups who are going to be affected and actually getting out to them, or inviting them in, or just finding ways to meaningfully engage with them so that we can actually satisfy the legals, but more so we can actually really understand how they feel about it, and how they if they understand what we're doing, and helping them to understand. I'm looking forward to taking the next stage. We did Monmouthshire Engages with staff yesterday, and we recognise that's only a quarter of the staff, and we've still got 3/4 to talk to, and we've got to find ways to do that, and also analyse the information which was fed to us from our staff. And that's a big piece of work in itself. I'm looking forward to the Monmouthshire Engages Schools, which is the sessions which we're going to be following on shortly, where some of us will go out and talk to and listen to the young people of Monmouthshire in many venues, and I'm looking forward to us again doing that and pulling all that forward. So yes, it's a bit frustrating that there wasn't quite the impact this year, but Monmouthshire, we are leading the way on engagement. There's no doubt about it. It's not perfect. We've got miles and miles to go on it. I accept that. But there are many authorities who aren't even getting out and talking to people yet. And we are, it's absolutely important, fundamental for us to know what our community want, because we need to build the services, sustainable services around their needs. And we need to understand, what those needs exactly are. And I think we've got a flavour here. I agree it's a small percentage, but we mustn't undermine that. There are still people who took time out to come and contribute, and there was it is a percentage, but there was a similar message voiced in different areas, which gives it some credibility. I think there are certain areas which you have to give some credibility to some of that feedback. I look forward to the next stages. Let's enhance it. I think, yes, a more targeted approach. Let's make sure we identify all of the stakeholders, and let's get and talk to them in that more focused way.
I've got Councillor Sarah Jones.
Thank you. Just briefly, it was just around the fact that obviously this is a great starting point. I know it started last year in terms of the budget engagement. But my concern, or rather where I want to see an emphasis, is on the longevity of our engagement with citizens. And I think there's been a good start made through the Monmouthshire Made Open, the digital platform there, which I'm just keen to see, firstly, that that's improved in terms of its usability. And secondly, it's marketed more effectively to our citizens. And I think looking at some of the networks you mentioned before, ensuring that we get that message out there that this is an opportunity for them to engage with us on a daily basis. It doesn't have to just be around a specific issue. So that was really just my point, that we try and take that forward more effectively in the long term.
Just on the Monmouthshire Made Open, it is the platform that we really do see an awful lot of the kind of the future interaction taking place on, and it's just about to be ready now with its full functionality, and that will give us a tremendous asset. And we're very lucky, I think, to have been able to kind of partner that organisation as they've developed that. It will give us the opportunity to create projects, to sponsor projects, for other people to sponsor projects, and it will really become a really useful tool for people to work around. And I think when we see one or two of those kind of key initiatives on that, which are led in the community, such as the town teams who are already talking to us about using it as their key vehicle, we'll really begin to see some momentum in that way. And I think it will be a real positive.
Councillor Armand Watts.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was just interested in you talking about the people that will be most affected by, obviously, these cuts and these continued cuts. It won't get any better. It's going to get a lot worse. And I think we can all anticipate that, sadly. But Will talked about the next round, and I guess what we're identifying are probably the most vulnerable people in our community will be affected. They're the most, I guess they're the people that would need our services the most. How would that look like? I mean, would you consider, say, going into sheltered accommodation, engaging with the elderly, things like that? I mean, how broad is it? And when Peter's talked about engagement with schools, and I wasn't aware that we were doing that, I've got to be honest with you. I think that's a good idea, because you can reach out to not just the teaching staff, obviously, but also the parents. I think that's fundamental. But he said some of us will be doing that. Who's some of us? Does he mean the cabinet? I'm not looking to make a political point. I'm simply just saying to broaden the inclusion in this, because you've got to take the opposition with you. You've got to take all members with you for them to understand precisely what you intend to do and what you want to do and where you're going with it. And it's important they also understand the conversations you are having. And I just think it's a little bit narrow. And I do think if you want positive, engagement and you want people to come along, I think you've really got to show at some point that by listening to people, you've enacted on some of the things that they've been telling you. I don't see any of that this year. All I see is that we've listened to people, it's fallen off because it's, you know, it's basically, it looks like it's a one-trick pony, and you've got to develop the show a little bit, really. And I think by, you know, my idea would be to actually engage with them and enact on some of the things that they're telling you. That's democracy.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll allow the leader to clarify from your question.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm disappointed, Armand, you raised that. The events were well publicised and open. All members were invited to the public events. Members were invited to call in around the drop-in centres. We had a handful of members who wished to support the consultation events. Yesterday, I believe all leaders were invited to the meeting with the 1,200 staff. You know, I can't, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. The opportunities are open. These are not closed shop consultation events. These are events where we want people to come and listen, and we want members to listen. So there's nothing secret. There's nothing, you know, like that at all. We wish members to get involved. Obviously, when we're still arranging the school processes, and I'm not 100% sure how the format will work. Obviously, we're going into schools and talking to young people. We've got to plan how the best way to do that is, and to be able to listen to them. 43 members going on in block in a school might be a difficult thing to manage. However, Ahmed, I invite you at any time to come along to any of our consultation events. It would be great to see you at one.
Okay, I've got Councillor Debbie Breakborough.
Sort of picking up on a few things that Councillor Watt was alluding to, but just to say that getting the formula right to maximise engagement is extremely difficult. And it also takes a few years, because for me engagement is about mutual trust and respect, and it does take a while to develop that mutual trust and respect between the residents and the council. Just taking on what Councillor Watts is saying, I think that is part of the engagement process. So they'll say something, it's taken into account, the information's fed back, so they know that actually there is a point of turning up to these meetings because they do listen, and you know what, we can influence policy. When looking at the attendance, in advertising, I think that is absolutely right. There was more advertising. It was out a lot earlier. It was just, I guess, how it was advertised, because it was about the budget. And people think, oh, it's a bit big, and it's a bit generic, and I don't know how I can influence that. But if you were brave, and I don't know how brave you could be, is to be issue specific. So to possibly say, come and talk to us about the possibility of libraries closing. We knew what happened to us when that happened, or the additional learning needs, or the school budgets being cut, or highlighting other services at risk of being cut. It just makes it more concrete. It's scary, but it just makes it a bit more concrete, a bit more real. This is how it's going to affect me. I better get there and talk. I absolutely applaud and support the targeted approach of consultation. It's brilliant that actually, you know what, through motions we can make a difference, because it was through Francis Taylor's motion with the support of the independents. We put that motion forward to carry out equality impact assessments on service changes, and then do targeted consultation on those affected, particularly the vulnerable groups, so they do they are able to contribute and express their views and the effect on them. Just in terms of going out, I think it's really difficult if we're expecting people to come to us, and sometimes come to Monmouth School, for example, they're having to make a point to come to meet the council. And I think more of, as you have already alluded to, which I think are brilliant ideas, is using the existing groups and actually going out into the streets. And I think you've got quite a lot of, a really good response in Mega. And I know as Chair of Democratic Services, we're looking to go out into the towns with a pop-up van, Monmouthshire County Council pop-up van, to explain our role and the role of the council. And when we were there, we did have huge amounts of people having interest and coming up and having a chat and asking questions. And I think that works really well. But, you know, how the engagement strategy is moving forward, I'm pleased with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Breakburt. I think just in terms of, absolutely, I think as we move into the second phase, I think it is much more targeted, and it's about going to where those people are, clearly identifying the user groups and actually going to talk to them. And I think that is this kind of balance, and it's always about balance in all of these different phases. For instance, in the first phase, at what point do you go? Do you go with proposals, and then people will think that there's a fait accompli and you don't actually there to really talk about things? Do you go with an open page, and then people find that difficult to relate to? So finding that balance, and exactly the same this time, we'll have to find that balance between that big conversation across the county and this much more targeted and specific work. But certainly when there are targeted communities and groups, we will go to talk to them directly, wherever it is. And certainly things like, you know, working in things such as residential homes are things which we've done in the past. And we've got members of staff who are very good in those settings, and they really kind of work very well with a whole range of people to actually really draw out those key aspects with them in a different approaches for different people. So it's not just surveys, it might be extended conversations. Those different approaches are really important. So thank you.
Councillor Francis Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to hear mention of the Equalities Act and protected characteristics so much in this chamber. It's been quite a long road, but I think we're getting there. I've got a number of questions I'd quite like to ask the officer, if I may, Chair. The report notes that successfully engaging with our communities is a critical part of the challenges that we face, and I think we'd all agree with that. I'm particularly interested in that, in addition to those with protected characteristics, I think we all acknowledge that those that are usually hardest hit by changes to public services are people on low incomes, whether they be low-income families or low-income individuals. And I'm interested in how we think that we've been doing in terms of engaging with, because there aren't obvious ways of, you know, contacting representative groups, shall we say, for people who are on low incomes. So I wonder how we are doing in those terms you would suggest, and how and what will we do, really, because it's logical that people on low incomes are often far more reliant on public services than those who are not. And whilst they are, you know, that is not a protected characteristic in law per se, it is morally and socially something that we absolutely must consider. So that's my first question. I'm slightly confused by the numbers of responses and then the attendees. So I was wondering, first of all, how many people or responses are the findings that we've got based on? You've obviously noted the numbers of people who came to the venues, which we've all discussed are reasonably low. I know you don't have exact numbers for the people who attended the drop-ins, but I understood that they were also doing questionnaires at the drop-ins. So that's what I wondered, because as you know, I, with support from Councillor Murphy, arranged a meeting, or not a meeting, sorry, a drop-in in Mega. But sadly there were some glitches in terms of organising that, of which I was not advised prior. So, but one thing I would say about this, and this is a plea, not a question, is that if you involve local members in those kind of matters, I mean, I specifically went round and spoke to quite a number of people who were looking for the officers then in the square the following day. And that can be done, and members have those contacts and are often willing to engage with people in that way. So I note that this is a general point as well. Members have a critical role and are often the first people to be asked questions. They don't have the insulation of being sat behind a desk in County Hall, unlike some officers. So it's really helpful if we know what's happening in our local areas, whatever it is. Can I also
again, and I'm not sure there is a clear answer, given the feedback from last year's events, we talked about being more specific with the information that we were giving to people. I note in the report that it's noted as we took a calculated risk and went with a blank page. And then we had quite low responses, and we had people not being 100% clear about how they could fill in the form. And I had a number of comments from people saying, I don't know who designed this questionnaire, but they didn't find the design particularly helpful. So I wonder what we've learned from that. And also, if we are to follow the principles of good consultation, i.e. the gunning principles, that is very clear that we need to give people the right information so that they can engage with us on a helpful basis. And I just wonder how that fits with the first round of consultation, really. I'd like your comments. And I'd just like to be reassured, can you give us a reassured that the key driver for these consultations and our future route is in fact good decision making, when all acknowledges that equality and social and am I to be delighted to think that equality and social inclusion is at the heart of Monmouthshire decision making, and we're not just concerned about potential legal challenges. And finally, given that we have 43 working days between now and the close of the budget proposals in January, and you're looking at the second stages, how, when and where will local members be involved, engaged, and as Armand says, have the information about what's going on so that they can support it in whichever way they wish? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Will McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take those. I won't perhaps try and answer your plea, but in the first question, certainly, the low income is a difficult one because, exactly as you said, it's not a protected characteristic as defined by the Act. But clearly, it's an area which we really want to work because we want to engage with everybody and not necessarily consult with everyone, but we do want to engage with everybody because that's at the heart of how we think we need to adapt and react as an organisation. So I think for us this next time, it's about us thinking about really understanding the nature of our communities. If there are places where we can go where people use certain facilities which we can get close to try and think about things differently there. So, perhaps in the North Abergavenny setting, if we think about the Acorn Centre and so on, provide an opportunity there for people to talk to us. So actually really think about the specific places that we can actually do that kind of engagement work. And I think that will be really important. The key part of it will be thinking through very clearly and very explicitly who the stakeholders are and who the service users are in terms of the impact of the mandate. And that's in a very pure consultation and legal requirement that we have to do. So, and I think that's always this tension that we kind of keep trying to balance. With regards to the different numbers, I will come back to you with some more specific numbers in terms of the completion of the survey and so on. I'd refer to my earlier answer in terms of us trying to learn on good practice what's been done elsewhere. Absolutely, I think what we're seeing increasingly that you have to put the needs of the service user, their expectations, their aspirations at the heart of your decision making. It's absolutely fundamental to how we've tried to approach things in terms of listening and actually trying to embed that. So I think that kind of rides right through and is kind of a huge supporter of making sure that equality is taken account of when we're actually making decisions as an organisation. And in terms of the timelines for how we go forward, we will probably look, I think, to share the next step, particularly the public part, which I suspect is the part that people really want to be engaged with. Although clearly we're, as a team, are open to your kind of your views and your judgments in terms of areas and places and things which will be useful to us to engage with and where we can go to consult with people. But certainly by the middle of next week, by Wednesday next week, we'll be letting you know where and when those community events will be, because it does sound to me that there is an appreciation of a blended approach. We'll be letting you know where they will be, what the dates will be, and what those formats will be, to make sure that you can be as engaged as you can as local members, because I absolutely recognise the fact that will really begin to stimulate local interest. I think the other part is that going out with a set of mandates now that will have local impacts will actually stimulate local interest, and I think that will be a definite difference between this phase and the last phase.
Right. I've got councillors Murphy, Edwards, Powell, Hackett, Payne, Down and Harris, and then I'd be minded to close the debate unless somebody's got a burning question. So I go to Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. An awful lot of what I was going to say has already been said, so I'm certainly not going to repeat it. The point that hasn't been made up to now is the scrutiny rounds. Yes, I was disappointed at the number of members of the public who came round, although the format did get an awful lot out of them, which it didn't, I don't think, in the first year. What was very, very short in supply at those engagement meetings was the number of members who actually turned up, and I thank very much those who did, but there's an awful lot who didn't, and I would urge them to play a very active part in the scrutiny rounds. Thank you.
Councillor Doug Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just start by saying how disappointed I was personally when I arrived at the Abergavenny Leisure Centre to find, the Leisure Centre, to find there were only 30 persons, and I probably was one of those 30. That in itself was extremely disappointing. I sometimes think that the issue of 37 mandates last year had so much good publicity that this attracted, the bigger audience. And I think the 150 to 200 people that turned up last year in Abergavenny were reasonably well briefed, and the conversations that took place were good, etc. Because we did it so well, I just think that we didn't close any, we decided not to close any leisure centres, libraries or museums. And I think it's really because it was painless, or appears to be comparatively painless. Maybe that was one of the reasons why we didn't attract an audience this time. The mandates, they were essential. And I think the sooner we get the next round of mandates, extremely important. I'm just quickly looking at my notes because I don't want to delay this debate much longer. The service areas this time, I think the finance one, I sat in on that particular service area in the leisure centre. It was poorly attended. We had officers there, such as Joy and somebody else, I think, there were two others, fully supportive. But, when you haven't got anybody to talk to, you don't get any feedback. So a disappointing meeting. I'm hoping that the engagement that we are going to get in the near future will be much improved. No fault of Will or anybody here. It is pure and simply, I think, there was nothing really, as far as I was concerned, to discuss, such as the mandates.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Watts mentioned at in time about having connections with the schools, and I think that would be very good. But after all governors here should be, all councillors here should be governors of schools, and through that we should be connecting. Pardon? Well, we are advised to be governors of schools, and as such we should have communication with other parts of the school, not just the children and the teachers, but the parent governors as well, so that there is some communication there, and it's up to us as governors to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hackett-Payne.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just to pick up on Councillor Watt's point about budget consultation and young people, we have a group of young people called Engage for Change who came and spoke to Cabinet a little while ago, I think probably about 18 months or so ago, and they have been quite prominent in discussing how they want the budget process for themselves to go ahead. And it was their idea actually to do it in the schools, and I think they're quite capable of organising it through the youth service themselves, and I fully applaud what they're doing, and most certainly will leave it to them.
Councillor Dow.
Can I at some point come back on that point?
I prefer not, Councillor. Perhaps you can take it outside the chamber. Councillor Down.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This has been quite a heavy debate in some ways, and some really deep points have been made. So perhaps I can just conclude the debate, as it were, with a touch of facetiousness. The engagement with the public is not new in Monmouthshire. It's become more prominent perhaps over the last year or so, but it's nothing new. I'm delighted to hear from members that they think that going out to people where they are, rather than expecting them to come to us, is something that a principle that we ought to adopt. And explaining things to people in terms which they understand and which they can readily engage is also a principle which is important. Given that in mind, after 10 years, is it time to dust off the Lego?
Right. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I remember the Lego, and once again, you know, it was whether or not it was representative samples. If I remember rightly, with the Lego example, we'd be out of business by now if we'd gone ahead with whatever was going on there. Just a comment, first of all, on Phil Murphy's statement.
Councillor, can I have a comment on the actual report that we got in front of us?
Coming on to that with some ideas.
If you would, please.
We are at blame here. We don't participate enough. That's my feeling, and I hope that I'll be proved wrong. Ideas you wanted. We've got Abergavenny Community Enterprise in the north of Abergavenny. That was the community's first office. There's a massive captive audience there that one day spent may be very effective. And the other thing is, just before, or I think during this, I was away on my own holiday, so I couldn't participate, but we have Local Democracy Week. Surely that is a massive occasion to start getting the concept out of what we're trying to do. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Haworth.
Thank you, Chairman, and I won't prolong the debate. Answer to Councillor Downs' question, I think I found the Lego. I know where that is, so I might dig that out for him. Yes, I think last year the public perception is what did we achieve by the hard work that we put in. Out the mandates, I think it was 50-something that they come up with, and perhaps there's one I've noticed today was the lottery. So perhaps they may be looking at it thinking, well, I got better things to do on them nights and I ain't going to bother anymore. I don't really know. But you are right. It's something we have to do, and we do well when we do it properly. At the moment, the mandates are there now, sitting there. We will be going out to public consultation with them mandates. They're there, I think, public now. So it will draw attention. I think we'll probably see we'll go to another level on the engagement. Local Democracy Week, I feel, in Abergavenny was probably one of the best things I've ever done as a councillor. And that was engaging with people, the true people, wandering round. Even people from Caldicot were in Abergavenny talking about things which was going on in Abergavenny and was going on in Caldicot also. So it was important that we were there, and I think it's something we should actually enhance in future. So I will find the Lego for Councillor Down, and perhaps we can have that conversation. We can perhaps remodel that and use it in a different way. Thank you.
All right, councillors, I think we've had a good debate on this issue, very lively and very good contributions made. I'll take you now to item 2, which is the recommendations. And on the recommendations, we've got 2.1, to receive the feedback from the Monmouthshire Engages event. 2.2, consider the initial feedback from the community survey. And 2.3, to consider the appropriateness of future engagement and consultation activity. I think we've contributed to all those areas, councillors, and so I'd be minded to take a block vote on the recommendations. So if you're all minded to vote now, all those in favour of the recommendations? Clearly carried. We now move on to item 10 on the agenda. Councillor Easton has withdrawn that question, as mentioned earlier in the meeting. So we're left with 10B, which is a question from Councillor Petroni to Councillor Murphy. Councillor Petroni, could you present it?
As read, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The answer is it's certainly our intention to do so, but as part of the budget round, and I don't want to preempt what comes out of the budget round, but it is certainly our intention to do that. Unfortunately, not the same as the caterers and the Welsh Government, who were advertising jobs at £6.85 an hour instead of the £7.80. But we certainly, it is built into our plans to do so, subject to the budget round.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor?
Yeah, no lectures from a party opposing the minimum wage. Can I just, do we have to do this every year? Well, am I going to have to ask every year about the living wage? Or is it going to be, like seriously, are we going to automatically integrate it? Or are we going to, every year as part of the budget, look at it?
At the moment, it's every year as part of the budget. Look at it, given the financial constraints, the implications of being accredited under the under the living wage are really quite onerous. And in better times, I think I'll give you a different answer. But at the moment, it's year by year.
Thank you, councillors. That concludes the actions today. Thank you for your patience, and it's a good debate. A bit heated at times, I think, but at least I think we have made your contributions. So I say thank you and hereby close the meeting.